In an 1890s LYON weaving room, the loom knotter's bench is yours, and the long morning of silk, thread, and quiet repair waits beneath your hands. Settle in now, and let the pace of the room become slow enough to breathe with. We'll stay close beside you tonight, among the wooden looms and the pale windows, while the city outside wakes gently along the Saône and the Rhône. The first thing you notice is the coolness of the floor. It comes through the soles of your shoes before the lamps have warmed the room. The boards hold last night's chill, and the air smells faintly of oil, damp stone, boiled silk, and old dust caught in rafters too high to reach. You're an 1890s LYON Loom Knotter, and before the looms can speak properly, before the shuttle can run cleanly across the warp, the broken threads must be found, matched, and tied. The workshop is not silent, even before the working day begins. There's a small ticking from a wall clock near the office door, a drip somewhere by the wash basin, and the soft creak of timber settling in the dark. When you move your hand across the edge of the loom, you feel old polish worn smooth by years of wrists and sleeves. The wood is not pretty in any grand way, but it's honest under your palm, rubbed by repetition until it feels almost warm. You begin where you always begin, at the front of the loom, where the warp threads stretch in their many pale lines. They look orderly from a distance, like rain drawn straight down from a white sky, but up close you can see the tiny interruptions. A thread has snapped and curled back on itself. Another hangs slack, no longer carrying its share of tension. Your work is to restore the pattern so quietly that, when the weaving starts, no one will think of you at all. That's the first comfort of the LYON Loom Knotter's day. You mend what would otherwise halt the room. You do not need to hurry toward applause, and no bell rings for each small success. Your fingers simply move through thread after thread, finding the break, drawing the ends together, twisting, looping, tightening, and smoothing the join until it can pass where it must pass. The knot is small enough to vanish, but strong enough to hold. In LYON in the 1890s, silk is not only cloth, it's work, weather, rent, bread, pride, worry, and habit. The city has been shaped by it for generations, from the steep streets of Croix-Rousse to the quieter workshops tucked behind plain doors. You know the names of fabrics by touch before anyone says them aloud. Satin slides with a low shine. Taffeta keeps a crisp little whisper. Velvet holds the light in a deeper way, like water under shade. Your bench stands near the loom because your eyes must be close to the warp. The light from the window is helpful only after morning has lifted fully, so at first you depend on the lamp and on memory. The flame makes each thread glow at the edge, and when you lean in, you can smell the lamp oil beneath the silk. It's a modest smell, a little sharp, but familiar enough that the room would feel strange without it. You keep a few simple tools within reach. There's a small hook, worn bright at the tip. There are scissors with narrow blades, a little cushion for loose pins, and a cloth for wiping your fingers when the day grows warm. Your most useful tools, though, are still your hands. The pads of your fingers have learned what your eyes might miss, and your nails are kept neat because a rough edge can catch a strand and spoil a careful tie. The knot itself is hardly larger than a seed. You take the broken end from the warp, and then you find the matching thread from the lease, the ordered crossing that tells you where each strand belongs. A wrong thread would disturb the pattern later, so you pause before you tie. The pause is part of the work. You look once, feel once, and then let your fingers make the tiny movement they have made so many times before. There is a particular sound to thread being drawn taut. It is not a snap, not when you do it properly. It's more like a breath caught between two fingers, a soft tightening that tells you the silk has accepted the knot. You trim the smallest loose end, smooth it down, and move to the next break. The loom waits with the patience of a large wooden animal, though we'll keep that thought soft and simple, no more than a shape in the dimness. As the morning gathers at the windows, the weaving room begins to fill around you, and the work of the 1890s LYON Loom Knotter settles into its ordinary rhythm. Other workers arrive by degrees, not all at once. A door opens below, and footsteps come up the stairs with the slow, uneven sound of people carrying sleep in their coats. Someone clears their throat. Someone sets down a tin lunch pail. You hear a low greeting, then another, and then the room takes on that early working warmth made of bodies, wool sleeves, damp shoes, and the first stirrings of the day's shared labor. You remain at the warp, because broken threads do not wait politely until everyone is ready. The loom has been dressed for work, but dressing a loom is never quite the same as making it ready. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of fine strands must pass in their proper order through heddles and reed. Each thread has its place, and your task is to keep those places from collapsing into confusion. It sounds simple when said quickly. In the hand, it's patient work. The silk touches you lightly, but it asks for attention. Too much force, and it complains. Too little, and the knot will not hold. You learn the exact middle pressure, the quiet firmness that belongs to thread and finger together. Your wrists rest when they can, your shoulders lower when you remember them. We stay there with you in the soft lamp glow, watching the day become work one knot at a time. The loom near you has a jacquard head above it, that clever arrangement of cards and cords that can lift selected warp threads into patterns more intricate than ordinary weaving could easily manage. You do not need to admire it loudly. It's simply there, part of the room's high wooden architecture. The punched cards hang in their chain like stiff paper steps, smelling faintly of dust and paste, and when the loom runs, they will guide flowers, leaves, borders, and repeating ornaments into cloth. But before any card can guide anything, the threads below must behave. That is where you live, in the narrow world between design and fabric. You check the crossing of the warp. You separate strands that have clung together overnight. A little moisture in the air can make them friendly in the wrong way, and your fingertip slides between them with care. The silk is cool at first, then warmer where your skin has touched it. The light changes slowly. LYON mornings can come grey through the upper panes, softened by mist from the rivers and smoke from chimneys. The glass is never perfectly clean, and that helps somehow. The world outside is filtered into pearl and ash, while inside the loom room, the pale threads catch what light they can. You bend close, and your own shadow moves across the warp like a passing cloud. There is a small discipline in how you sit. Your back cannot be stiff all day, or the day will punish you by noon. So you learn to fold yourself gently toward the work. One foot placed steady, one elbow sometimes resting, never too heavily. The bench has its old dents and polished corners. It knows the shape of workers who came before you, and you add your own quiet pressure to that long memory. The overseer may pass once, looking more at the looms than at faces. That is ordinary. You do not need to meet the glance for long. Your proof is in the smooth passage of the warp, in the absence of stoppage, in the cloth that will later show no little flaw where a broken thread once hung. Much of good work is invisible when it succeeds, and tonight we can let that invisibility feel restful instead of lonely. You take another broken strand between finger and thumb. It is finer than hair, but it has its own stubbornness. You moisten the very tip, just enough to tame the loose fibers, and roll it against its mate. There is a faint taste of silk dust and workshop air, something dry and mineral, something oily from the machines. You tie, tighten, trim and smooth. The knot disappears into the crowd. By mid-morning the looms begin their fuller sound, and the LYON weaving room no longer waits. It breathes, clacks, lifts, and settles around your steady hands. The first full running of the looms changes the air. Wood knocks against wood. The shuttle moves with its clean, practiced flight. The treadles and harnesses answer each other in a layered rhythm, not gentle exactly, but steady enough that your mind can lean against it. Under the louder sounds, you still hear the small ones. Thread slipping through reed, paper cards shifting above, a bobbin's faint complaint, a chair leg moving on the floor. As a loom knotter in 1890s LYON, you do not stand apart from this music, you work inside it. When the loom stops, even briefly, you notice at once, because the room loses one of its pulses. A weaver calls softly, or perhaps only looks your way. You rise with your hook and your scissors, stepping between benches and frames, careful not to brush a hanging chain of cards or disturb a basket of prepared weft. The stopped loom has its own little silence. Around it, the other machines continue, which makes the quiet at its center feel more exact. You lean in and find the trouble. A warp end has broken near the heddle, leaving one line empty where the pattern needs it. The weaver's hands have already moved aside for you, and without much speech, you take your place. In rooms like this, words are often smaller than gestures. You feel for the missing end. Sometimes it lies plainly against the others. Sometimes it hides backward, curled under tension, or clinging to a neighbor so closely that only a fingertip can tell the difference. The thread is slightly warmer here, touched by friction and the motion of the loom. The air smells of stirred dust now, and of oil warmed in metal joints. You breathe shallowly while you search, not from fear but from habit. There it is, a tiny line, loose and bright, caught just behind the reed. You bring it forward with the hook, slow enough not to fray it. Then you find its proper companion. Guided by the order of the warp and the memory of the threading, your fingers make the knot where the loom can tolerate it, not where it merely suits you. That's another kind of knowledge, learned by many small corrections over many long days. The weaver waits. You know the waiting has weight, because a still loom earns nothing while it stands. But the room has taught you not to rush the knot. A hurried knot becomes a second break. A careless join becomes a flaw that travels forward into cloth. So you hold the ends, turn them, pass one over the other, draw them into a small firm shape, and test the tension with a touch light enough to trust. When the loom starts again, it does not thank you. It simply resumes. The shuttle runs, the harness rises, the pattern continues as though nothing has happened. That is the satisfaction. The interruption closes behind you. You return to your bench with the sound of the repaired loom joining the others, and for a while your hands feel especially awake, as though the knot has tied you back into the room as well. There may be a cup of coffee later, dark and not especially generous, poured from a small pot someone keeps near a safer corner. It smells stronger than it tastes. You drink it warm if you can, lukewarm if the work keeps you too long. Bread may be wrapped in cloth, and perhaps a bit of cheese, or something left from supper. The food is plain, but at mid-morning, plain things have their own kindness. You do not eat with clean hands, not entirely. Silk dust clings in the fine creases of your fingers. A little oil darkens one nail. You rub your thumb against a crust of bread and feel the roughness differently after so much thread. The room continues around you, and we can stay with that small human pause. The cup, the bread, the breath taken while the machines keep speaking. When the morning's first hunger passes, the work narrows again, and your attention returns to the places where a single thread can trouble the whole cloth. The afternoon is not yet near, but the day has already found its shape. The LYON Loom Knotter's work is made of returns. You return to the same frame, the same warp, the same careful searching, and yet no two breaks are exactly alike. One thread parts cleanly, another frays into a soft little broom. A third has been weakened by rubbing, and you can feel its tiredness before it fails. There is skill in knowing which thread will betray the loom soon. You run your fingers gently over a suspect stretch, and the roughened place speaks to you through touch. It catches where the others slide. It has lost a little shine. You may replace it before it stops the weaving, drawing in a fresh length with the patience of someone mending a path before a wheel sinks into it. This is not dramatic work. It's attentive work, which is deeper. The workshop air grows warmer by degrees. At first the change is welcome. Then it gathers under collars and cuffs. The lamp flames are less necessary now, but the machines themselves lend heat, and the room's high ceiling holds a faint haze. You smell wool from coats hung on pegs, soap from someone's sleeve, hot oil, paper dust, and the dry mineral scent of old plaster. The city outside is present only as a muted brightness. Your eyes grow used to small distances. Far things become less real for a while. The window, the street, even the clock are only background. What matters is the crossing of pale threads before you, the angle of a broken end, the precise place where a knot must sit. You blink often, and sometimes you look away on purpose, letting your gaze rest on the darker beam above the loom so the white lines do not swim. We might think of knotting as one action, but for you it contains many. There is finding, separating, matching, moistening, looping, tightening, trimming, testing, smoothing, and watching the repaired thread pass once through its first movement. Each little part has a tempo. Your fingers do not do them all at the same speed. They slow at the match, quicken at the loop, pause at the test, and relax only when the thread holds. The tools gather their own warmth. The scissors fit your hand in a particular way, and the metal has a dull shine where your fingers rest. The hook is almost nothing, just a small extension of intention, but without it some breaks would cost much more time. You set it down in the same place each time. If another worker borrows it and returns it elsewhere, your hand still reaches for the old spot before your eyes correct it. There is conversation, but it comes in pieces. A remark about rain, a question about a delivery of dyed silk. Someone mentions a cousin in another workshop, or the price of coal, or a child with a cough. The looms swallow most of the words, so speech becomes practical and close. You lean nearer to hear, answer simply, and return to the threads. The day does not require you to be entertaining, it asks only that you stay. In the 1890s, LYON still carries the memory of older silk workers, of canuts and steep streets and rooms where looms once filled homes as much as factories. You may not speak of history while you work, but you live among its habits, the careful thrift with thread, the respect for a clean pattern, the knowledge that fine cloth is made not by one grand gesture, but by thousands of small obedient crossings. And as the light lifts higher over LYON, the loom room becomes less like a place beginning and more like a place continuing, with you held quietly inside its long, practiced day. By late morning, the thread has taught your hands its moods again, and the room has taught your breathing how to fit between the looms. You sit close enough to feel the faint tremor in the timber frame, a small steady shiver that passes from beam to bench. The silk lines before you seem almost still, yet every one of them belongs to movement. We stay near that quiet contradiction, because the LYON Loom Knotter's work lives there, where stillness is only the pause before the shuttle runs. You have learned to look without staring too hard. If you force your eyes into the warp, the threads begin to dazzle, and the pale ones blur together like rain on glass. So you soften your gaze and let the broken place show itself by difference. A slack line hangs a little wrong. A knot from an earlier repair makes a tiny shadow. Your finger moves toward it before your thoughts have fully named it, and that is how repeated work becomes knowledge stored in the body. The loom in front of you is making a patterned silk that will later seem effortless to anyone who touches it in a shop. They may notice the shine, the drape, the flowered border, or the way the cloth changes color when turned toward the window. They will not picture your thumb and forefinger finding a break near the heddles. They will not hear the workshop clock or smell the lamp oil cooling behind you. Yet your small knot will be inside that smoothness, hidden where only the work remembers. When the warp thread breaks near the reed, the repair is close and visible. When it breaks farther back, the task lengthens, and you must reach into the ordered depth of the loom. The lease rods help you keep the crossing clear. The heddles hang in their rows, each with its little eye, and every thread must pass where the pattern requires. Your hook enters carefully, then withdraws with the correct end. There is no flourish in the motion, only care. The air around the loom has texture now. Warm dust floats where sunlight finds it, and the smell of heated oil lies low near the moving parts. Your cuff brushes the wood, and a small pale streak of lint clings to the dark fabric. Somewhere behind you, a bobbin drops into a basket with a hollow sound. Someone laughs once, quietly, and the laugh is immediately folded back into the broader rhythm of weaving. In the 1890s LYON weaving room, there is always the sense that the day is made of many days before it. The same floorboards have heard older boots. The same kinds of breaks have stopped older looms. Your work is modern enough to live beneath the jacquard cards, and old enough to belong to fingers that would have understood it generations earlier. We let that thought pass softly, like light moving over worn wood, because it doesn't need to be made grand to be felt. Near noon, the room changes its appetite, and the work becomes aware of bodies as much as thread. Stomachs grow hollow, shoulders ask to be lowered, fingers which have been obedient since early morning begin to feel the thin edges of their own fatigue. You flex them under the bench, then return them to the silk. The next knot is waiting, and you give it the same patience as the first, because the cloth cannot tell whether you are tired. The break is stubborn this time. One end has split into little fibers, soft as down and troublesome as dust. You roll it gently, moistening it only enough to bring it together. Too much dampness can mark the thread or make it cling. Too little leaves it wild. You know this by touch, by small failures remembered without bitterness. Your hands have become a quiet ledger of what works, what phrase, and what must be done again more slowly. A bell or a call may mark the noon pause, depending on the workshop and its habits. The looms do not all fall silent at once, but their sound thins as workers stop, step back, or finish the last movement before resting. The room exhales. You hear the city more clearly through the windows. A wheel on stone, a distant voice, perhaps the softened clatter from another building where work has not yet paused. LYON is nearer when the looms grow still. Your meal is simple and kept close. Bread wrapped in cloth, a piece of cheese, perhaps an apple with the cool smell of a cellar still in its skin. You sit where there is space, not ceremony. The bench edge presses into the back of your legs, and your hands rest open in your lap for a moment. We can remain with that image, your fingers no longer pinching thread, the small crescent marks fading where the scissors pressed against the skin. The food tastes of morning hunger. The bread is dense, the crust rough, and crumbs fall into the creases of your work clothes. You brush them away without thinking. Someone pours water from a stoneware jug, and the cup feels cool against your palm. Steam from another worker's soup brings the smell of onion, cabbage, or broth across the room, mingling with silk dust and machine oil in a way that belongs completely to the workday. Conversation at noon is softer because it no longer has to fight the looms. Even so, no one spends words carelessly. There is talk of thread deliveries, a dye lot that came slightly darker than expected, a rent due on Friday, a mother who knows a better way to mend wool stockings. You listen while eating, answering when the talk comes near you. Your place among the others is simple. You are known by the work you can do well. After food, there is a small drowsiness that visits everyone. Even in a room full of machines, it settles behind the eyes and in the warm hollow beneath the ribs. You do not resist it harshly. You let it pass through you while you clean your fingers, check the points of the scissors, and set the hook back into its familiar place. The LYON Loom Knotter returns to the warp, not with excitement, but with steadiness. And when the noon pause has softened and gone, the afternoon begins in the same room, though the light has moved and the thread has taken on another color. The first knots after rest require a renewed gentleness. Your hands are slightly slower, and that is not a fault. Slowness keeps the silk from punishing you. The sun has shifted across the high window, and the warp now shines more on one side than the other. Pale threads become bright threads, then shadowed threads, depending on where you lean. You adjust your seat by a finger's width and return to the small, exact world before you. In 1890s LYON, the afternoon in a silk workshop can feel longer than the morning, because the day has lost its freshness, but not its demands. The looms resume with their layered clatter, and the floor begins again to carry vibration. The jacquard cards lift and fall above some frames, making a dry paper sound among the heavier wooden knocks. You feel the rhythm through your shoes. You hear it in your teeth, almost as a low murmur beneath everything else. A knotter's afternoon has a different kind of listening. You listen for the altered beat of a loom that has caught or slowed. You listen for the weaver's call, sometimes only your name spoken through the noise. You listen for the faint, irregular whisper of threads rubbing where they should pass cleanly. Not every warning is loud. Some arrive as a tiny change in resistance when your hand crosses the warp, and you honor those small warnings because they save longer trouble. There is a loom near the wall that has been temperamental all week. Its wood is sound, its heddles mostly obedient, and its shuttle runs cleanly enough. Yet the warp breaks more often than it should. Perhaps the silk was dried too hard. Perhaps a reed tooth has a roughness nearly too small to see. You go to it when called, carrying your little tools. The wall beside it is cool, and the plaster has a faint powdery smell. You bend in close and find the familiar trouble. A thread has worn thin where it passes through the reed, and another beside it is beginning to show the same weakness. Your fingers read the place gently. There is a burr somewhere, a tiny harshness that has been worrying the silk. You cannot remake the whole loom, but you can smooth, adjust, and watch. You tie the break, then mark the suspect place in memory, which is often the first notebook of a working hand. The repair needs to pass through the reed, so the knot must be especially small. You trim it with the smallest closing of the scissors, hearing that delicate snip beneath the loom room's heavier sounds. The loose ends fall almost invisibly. You brush them from the cloth beam and wait for one slow movement, then another. The knot travels where it must. It does not catch. The weaver nods, and you return the nod, because that is enough. Afternoon light shows dust more clearly. It lies along the tops of beams, on window bars, and in the tiny corners of the loom where no cloth will ever be woven. It also catches in your hair and at your cuffs. You are not dirty in the careless sense. You are marked by the room, as the room is marked by the people who tend it. Work leaves evidence, and some of it is as fine as silk powder on the skin. When your eyes need rest, you look toward the windows and see lion beyond the glass in fragments. A roofline, a chimney, a pale wash of sky, perhaps the slope toward Croix-Rousse, if the workshop sits where the old silk streets rise, or perhaps only the narrow side of another building. The city does not need to be scenic to keep you company. Its damp stone, close walls, and passing footsteps make a background for your own narrow task. The pattern being woven has its own slow emergence. You see it not as a customer would, but from the working side, where beauty arrives backward, interrupted by mechanisms and practical concerns. A leaf shape appears in silk, a border repeats, a flower returns, then returns again, each one dependent on thread behaving properly at the right moment. Your knots do not design the pattern, but they protect its chance to appear. We can imagine the designer somewhere else, with paper, ink, and squared plans. We can imagine the card cutter, the dyer, the throster, the merchant, and the hands that reeled silk from cocoons far from this room. But you do not travel through all of that while working. You stay with what is before you, the broken end, the proper match, the clean tie. The wide world narrows kindly into one repair. There is comfort in that narrowing. Many things in life cannot be fixed by a single clear motion, but this thread can. It has broken, it has a place, it can be joined. The repair must be careful, and it may not hold forever. Yet for now, the loom can continue. You feel the truth of that in your fingers, and the truth is modest enough to rest beside. As the afternoon wears on, the LYON Loom Knotter's work moves from fresh attention into practiced endurance, and the room grows warmer around the repeating task. The heat gathers close to the body first. Your collar feels less crisp. Your sleeves hold the warmth of your arms. The bench has taken the shape of the day beneath you, and when you shift, the wood gives a quiet creak. A fly circles near the window, striking the glass now and then with a faint dry tap. You hear it only when a nearby loom pauses, and then the larger rhythm returns, covering the little sound. The silk itself changes slightly with the room. Threads may swell or relax with dampness, tighten with dryness, or behave differently as the air warms. In a LYON workshop, workers learn the weather indoors as much as out. A rainy morning can make the warp cling. A dry wind can make threads more brittle. You feel those changes before anyone explains them, and your hands respond with small adjustments no visitor would notice. You draw a broken thread forward and hold it against the light. Its color is not plain white, though from a distance it might seem so. It has hints of cream, pearl, and pale straw, depending on the angle. Dyed threads bring their own pleasures, especially deep blues, soft greens, or reds with a quiet brown warmth. Yet the pale silk lets you see every fiber. It reveals everything, which makes it both helpful and unforgiving. The knot you make now is one you could almost do with your eyes closed, though you do not. You cross the ends, turn one through, draw them together, and tighten only as much as needed. Then your thumb smooths the little join as though calming it. The motion is intimate without being sentimental. You have done it hundreds of times, perhaps thousands, and still the exact pressure matters. Nearby, someone replaces a shuttle, and the wooden piece lands in the hand with a familiar weight. Another worker winds a bit of thread onto a bobbin. The winding makes a soft, fast rasp, like dry grass pulled through fingers. There is a smell of wax where thread has been dressed to pass more smoothly. It is faint, but once you notice it, it seems to sit at the edge of every breath. If the workshop keeps records, they are likely in a plain ledger near the office, with columns for orders, lengths, losses, wages, and deliveries. Your knots are not written one by one. No page could hold them all, and no clerk would try, yet the ledger depends on them. Cloth measured at the end of the day carries the value of each unnoticed repair. The accounting of work is sometimes visible only after the work has disappeared. Your body keeps its own ledger. The left thumb has a tender place. The right shoulder tightens if you forget to lower it. Your eyes ask for distance every so often, and your knees prefer when you stand before they are forced to complain. You learn to answer these requests quietly. A little stretch beside the loom, a sip of water, a breath taken near the window, where the air is only slightly cooler but feels different enough. There is a sound from outside, perhaps a cart passing over stones, its wheels uneven in the street. For a moment, the rhythm does not belong to the workshop. It belongs to goods moving through LYON, to bundles of silk, coal, bread, paper, vegetables, and all the other ordinary things a city must carry to keep itself alive. Then the cart sound fades and you return to the finer traffic of thread through reed and heddle. Sometimes the break is not in the warp, but near a selvage, where the edge of the cloth must be kept clean and firm. An untidy edge is noticed quickly. It can make the whole piece seem less well made, even when the center is sound. You attend to it carefully. The edge threads endure their own strain, catching, turning, and holding the boundary between woven cloth and loose possibility. Your repair keeps that boundary quiet. The weaver beside you has a habit of tapping 2 fingers on the frame while waiting. You know the rhythm now. It is not impatience exactly, just the body spending a little motion while the loom is still. You tie, test, and step aside. The tapping stops as the loom starts. No one makes a speech of gratitude. In this room, usefulness is often acknowledged by making space for the work to continue. By now the afternoon has settled deep into the boards, and the old collaboration between hand, thread, wood, and weather continues without needing to announce itself. A loom knotter in 1890s LYON must understand that thread is both material and message. Each strand has a duty in the pattern, and when it breaks, the message stutters. Your knot restores not only tension, but meaning. That may sound grand if spoken in the street, so we keep it humble here. In the room itself, it feels like placing one small word back into a long sentence of silk. The jacquard cards above some looms carry their own quiet authority. Their punched holes determine which cords lift, which threads rise, and which remain below for the shuttle's passage. You may glance up at them when a pattern repeats, seeing the card chain advance with its dry, papery step. They are ingenious, yes, but they are also practical objects, smudged by hands and softened at their edges. Even cleverness gathers dust when it lives in a workshop. You work below that invention, where the actual fibers bear the strain. A card can command a thread to rise, but it cannot make a frayed thread strong. A design can call for a clean flower, but it cannot tie the broken warp. Your place is where intention meets resistance. You do not argue with either one, you simply help them meet a little more gently. The afternoon brings small variations. A new warp on one loom may need extra attention as it settles. An older warp near finishing may break more often because the tension has changed. The first part of a piece has one temperament, the last another. You learn the ages of work in progress by feel. A fresh warp has the tight promise of a newly made bed. A nearly finished one has the weariness of a road already traveled. You notice when the cloth beam has thickened with woven silk. Layer by layer, the finished fabric winds forward, hidden from full view until unrolled later. There is pleasure in knowing it is there, growing quietly beneath the work. The surface may be protected with paper or cloth, guarded from dust and accidental marks. You do not touch it without need. Finished silk deserves clean hands, and your hands are always between cleanliness and use. A messenger or apprentice may pass through with a bundle of materials. The bundle gives off a smell of paper wrapping, cord, and outside air. For a moment, the room gains a draft from the open door, cooler at the ankles and carrying a trace of street damp. Then the door closes, and the workshop returns to itself. Heat, dust, oil, silk. The familiar mixture settles back over everything like an old shawl. We stay close to your work because it asks for closeness. From far away, knotting is nearly nothing to see. Someone bends, touches thread, straightens, moves on. But from where you sit, it is a whole landscape of crossings and tensions. The warp is a field of narrow paths. The heddles are gates. The reed is a comb with fine teeth. Your hook travels carefully through this small country, finding the road that has broken. There may be small injuries, though the day does not dwell on them. A nick from the scissors, a rough place near the nail, a thread drawn too sharply across skin, leaving a line that fades by supper. You notice, perhaps press the thumb once, then continue. These are not heroic marks. They are simply the body's conversation with tools, and most of the conversation is quiet. As the light begins to lean, the workshop takes on another tone, and the tasks that remain are measured against the coming end of the shift. Late afternoon in Lyon carries a different color. The windows grow warmer where the sun reaches them, or grayer if cloud has thickened over the rivers. The room's shadows lengthen behind frames and benches. Dust in the air becomes visible in slow drifting layers. You can smell the day's full work now. Oil heated and cooled, wool dampened and dried, wood rubbed by hands, and silk passing endlessly over smooth and rough surfaces. Your own movements become more economical. You do not waste a reach. The scissors return to the same spot. The hook lies angled toward your right hand. A stray thread is wound around a finger, removed, and placed aside without thought. Fatigue can make some people clumsy, but long practice has taught you another way. You become smaller in your motions, conserving effort while keeping the care intact. A weaver calls from the far side of the room, and you cross the aisle slowly, stepping where the floorboards are familiar. The path between looms is narrow, and your shoulder turns slightly to avoid a projecting part of the frame. You pass close enough to feel warmth rising from another worker's sleeve. The stopped loom waits, its silence surrounded by noise. You enter that silence and look for the broken thread. This break is difficult because several threads have tangled together. A small disorder has spread from one failure into a little knot of confusion. You do not pull hard. Pulling would tighten the trouble. Instead, you loosen what can be loosened, separate one strand, then another, and hold each aside with a patient finger. The silk reflects light in sharp lines, and your eyes move slowly through them, choosing order over speed. The weaver watches, and we stand beside you in that waiting. There is no need to make the moment tense. It is only a problem being answered by time. You free the correct end, match it, tie it, and then ease the neighboring threads back into their proper positions. A tiny combing motion with the hook settles them. The loom resumes. The pattern, interrupted for a few breaths, continues as though it had only been thinking. This is part of the dignity of the LYON Loom Knotter. You are trusted with confusion at its smallest scale. Before a flaw becomes visible, before an order is delayed, before frustration grows in the room, you place your attention where the trouble begins. Your work is not to command the loom, but to listen to it closely enough that it can continue being itself. The light at the window may show smudges on your fingertips. Silk workers often live among fine materials and practical grime at the same time. The The cloth may be destined for a drawing room, a dressmaker, a merchant's shelf, or a church furnishing, but the making of it belongs to hands with roughened skin. That contrast does not trouble you. Fine things have always needed ordinary rooms, ordinary hunger, and ordinary hands. When a fresh bobbin is set into place, you notice its color more clearly in the late light. A green might look almost black until it moves. A cream might become gold for one brief angle. A red might hold the warmth of brick or dried fruit. Color in silk is rarely flat. It deepens, slips, and changes with the direction of the thread. You learn to see color not as one thing, but as behavior. The knotter's eye becomes attentive to such behavior. A thread that reflects differently may be twisted wrong, strained or out of place. A shadow where there should be none may mean a loose end. A line too bright may mean tension has shifted. You do not need to name each possibility aloud. Your hand goes to the place, and the place tells you more. This kind of seeing is almost touch at a distance. Outside, the working day of the city moves toward evening, though not all labor ends together. Bakers, carters, laundresses, clerks, porters and shopkeepers all keep their own clocks. In your room, the looms measure time by picks, by length woven, by repairs made and remade. The wall clock measures it with hands. Your body measures it in the ache behind the shoulder blades and the softening of attention that comes near dusk. And as evening begins to gather at the edges of the windows, the last portion of the shift asks for the same care as the first, only quieter inside you. The final hours can be the most delicate because everyone can feel the end approaching. Not excitement, exactly, but a loosening thought of supper, streets, stairs, and a place to sit without machinery nearby. Yet the loom does not know the hour. The warp still breaks if neglected. The reed still catches a rough knot. The pattern still needs every thread to rise and fall as if morning had just begun. You remind yourself by touch, thread between finger and thumb, hook in hand, scissors near, breath steady. The room may be tired, but the work remains fresh at the point where it meets you. That thought is useful, so we let it stay. You do not have to carry the whole day at once. You only have to repair the strand now crossing your hand, the small break asking for attention. A young worker may come near to watch, not formally apprenticed to you perhaps, but curious about how quickly your fingers move. You slow a little, not to perform, but to make the action visible. The two ends cross, one turns under. The knot closes with a tiny firmness. You trim, you test. The young worker sees the motion and not all the years inside it. That is natural. Years often hide inside simple gestures. You might say a few words if the loom noise permits. Not too tight, not too wet. Watch where the knot will pass. The advice is plain because the work is plain at its heart, even when difficult. The younger hands will learn by failing gently, by making knots too large, by losing the matching end, by discovering that silk remembers rough handling. You were taught the same way, by correction, repetition, and the quiet embarrassment of doing again what was not yet right. There is kindness in skilled correction when it is given without sharpness. The room has enough hard surfaces already. Wood, metal, deadlines, rent, cold mornings. A calm word travels farther than a harsh one, especially in work where the hands must stay steady. You return to your own loom, and the young worker returns to theirs, carrying one small piece of your practice into another pair of fingers. The evening air may bring dampness. Lyon's rivers have their say after sundown, and stone streets hold coolness even after a warm day. If a window is opened, the draft touches your face and the back of your neck. It smells of smoke, water, and the day outside. For a moment, the workshop's oil and dust loosen their hold. Then the draft shifts, and the familiar indoor air gathers again. You notice the lamps being prepared before they are fully needed. A wick trimmed, a chimney wiped. The glass has a faint soot mark that blackens the cloth used to clean it. The lamp flame, once lit, gives a soft amber circle over the work. Not as true as daylight, but more intimate. Under lamplight, silk changes again. Pale threads become warm. Shadows thicken between them. Your eyes slow down, and your fingers become even more certain. A break under evening lamplight can be troublesome. but there is beauty in it too. The single loose thread catches the flame and glows for a moment, as if it has been drawn in gold. You know it is only silk, only a broken end needing repair, but the day has made you tender towards small things. You bring it forward with the hook, find its mate, and tie it into usefulness again. The loom's sound at nightfall seems heavier than in morning. Perhaps the machines are the same, and only your body hears them differently. The clack of wood has a deeper edge. The shuttle's movement feels more insistent. The floor's vibration climbs slowly through tired legs. Yet the rhythm also comforts you, because it has carried the day this far. We can let it carry us a little farther, steady as breathing beside a sleeping street. As the lamps take over from the windows, the 1890s LYON workshop becomes a room of amber pools and shadowed frames, and your knotting grows smaller, slower, and more exact. The high parts of the looms disappear first. The beams and card chains become dark shapes above the lamplight. What remains clear is the place where your hands work. Thread, reed, heddle, hook. The circle of seeing narrows, and perhaps that suits the hour. You are not asked to think about the whole city now. You are asked to tend this small lit area where a few threads have lost their way. The lamp has its own faint sounds, a soft hiss, a small flutter when the air moves. The glass chimney gives off heat if your hand passes too close. Its smell joins the oil of the machines, warmer and sharper than the smell of daylight. Your shadow falls over the warp, then moves aside. You learn to place your body so that the light serves the knot rather than hiding it. By this time, speech in the room has thinned again. People save their words because the day has spent them. A question still passes when needed. A short answer returns. Someone coughs into a sleeve. Someone's chair scrapes. Mostly there is work and the nearness of finishing. The LYON Loom Knotter's task does not become grander at the end. It becomes more faithful, because the last repairs matter just as much as those made when everyone was fresh. A finished length may be examined near the end of the day, though not always by you. Cloth unrolled from the beam carries a faint warmth from being wound upon itself. It may smell of silk, paper, and the room where it was made. Under the lamp, the pattern rises and settles with the movement of hands. If a flaw appears, eyes trace it back to a missed break, a wrong lift, a knot too large, or some other small beginning. You do not fear that inspection in a dramatic way. You respect it. Inspection is another kind of attention, and all good work must pass through more than one set of eyes. Still, there is relief when the cloth lies smooth. A clean surface means many hidden moments succeeded. It means broken threads were found in time. It means your day, though humble and repetitive, has entered the fabric without leaving a scar. The tools on your bench are familiar enough to seem almost arranged by themselves. Scissors angled inward, hook beside them, a scrap of thread curled like pale hair, a cloth darkened by fingertips, a pin lying where it should not, which you move back before it can cause trouble. The small ordering of a bench is not separate from the work. It keeps the mind from snagging on needless searches. When you stand, your knees speak softly. The body has been folded toward thread for hours, and it must remember its full height. You place one hand on the loom frame for balance. The wood is warm from the room, polished under your palm, and faintly sticky where oil and dust have settled into old finish. You straighten slowly, not because you are weak, but because the day has been long in 1,000 little ways. A final call may come just when you think the work is easing. One more break, one more stopped loom. You take up the hook again and go without complaint, because every worker knows this little joke of timing. The last task arrives when the coat is almost in the mind, when supper has begun to imagine itself. You bend to the warp, and the room returns you to the present. The break is simple, thankfully, a clean parting near the front, with both ends visible. You tie it neatly, almost gratefully, and trim the tails. The loom restarts with a sound that seems larger than the repair deserved. That is often the way of things. A small action returns a large rhythm. You step back and let the machine have its voice again. Now the end of the shift approaches not as an event, but as a gradual permission. Some looms finish their set length, others are left prepared for morning. Threads are secured so they will not tangle overnight. Tools are gathered, lamps are checked. The workshop does not fall apart when workers leave. It is put gently into waiting. You take part in that waiting, because tomorrow's ease begins with tonight's small order. And when the looms begin to quiet one by one, the LYON Loom Knotter's hands turn from repair to putting away, and the room changes from labor into rest. Silence does not arrive all at once. It comes in layers, as if someone is folding a large cloth. One loom stops, then another. A shuttle is lifted out and laid aside. A belt slackens. A frame settles. The floor still trembles from a machine at the far end. Then that too becomes still. In the new quiet, your ears ring faintly with the memory of sound. The absence has its own texture. You brush loose threads from the bench. They cling to your sleeve and then let go. Some are too short to save. Others are wound into a small usable twist because waste is noticed in a silk room. You close the scissors and place them where they belong. The hook goes beside them, tip turned inward so it will not catch a sleeve in the morning. These motions are nearly ceremonial, though no one calls them that. The warp threads on the loom remain stretched in their ordered lines. In lamplight, they look calm after all their small troubles. You check the places where you worked last, not because you doubt yourself, but because the eye likes closure. A knot sits cleanly. A repaired end holds its tension. The reed is clear. The heddles hang quiet. You leave the loom as you would leave a sleeping room, with nothing loose enough to disturb the night. There may be a written note if a loom needs special attention in the morning. More often, the message is spoken to someone trusted, or held in memory if the shop is small enough. The temperamental reed near the wall, the warp that seemed dry, the place where two threads rubbed. You carry these details the way others carry addresses or errands, tucked into the practical part of the mind that wakes before the rest of you. Your hands need cleaning, though they will not become perfectly clean. Warm water, if available, is a luxury at day's end. Cold water is more likely, and it bites gently at the knuckles. Soap takes away some oil and dust, but the day remains in faint lines around the nails. You dry your hands on rough cloth. After so much silk, the towel feels coarse, almost surprising, and the sensation brings you back to the ordinary world. Coats are taken from pegs. Lunch cloths are folded. A chair is pushed under a bench. Someone jokes softly about the chill outside, and someone else answers with the weary humor of people who have shared a long room. The words are not sharp. They loosen the day. You put on your outer layer and feel its weight settle across shoulders that have been bent toward thread since morning. When the door opens, evening air enters with a cool rush. It smells of stone, smoke, horse, damp river, and the faint sour trace of crowded streets. The workshop smell follows you out, clinging to cuffs and hair. For a little while you carry the weaving room through Lyon. If you pass close to another worker, you can smell their day too, the same mixture of oil, fiber, lamp, and human warmth. The stairs down may be narrow, your feet know them. Each step has a shallow worn place near the center, polished by many departures. Outside the light is lower than you expected, or perhaps exactly as low as your tired body knew it would be. Windows glow here and there. Voices rise from a shop door. A cart moves slowly past, and its wheels make a wet sound if the street has been recently washed or rained upon. You do not leave the work completely when you leave the building. Your fingers still remember the knots. They move once inside your pocket, thumb rubbing gently against forefinger, as if checking an invisible thread. This echo of labor is common. The body continues what it has repeated all day, then gradually lets it fade. We walk with you through that fading, keeping the pace unhurried and the street sounds soft. But before the day can fully release you, there is the small passage home through 1890s LYON, where the city carries its own evening rhythm around your tired hands. The streets near the silk districts are not grand at this hour. They are practical, close, and lived in. Stone holds the day's dampness. Doorways smell of cooking, coal smoke, and old wood. Somewhere, Water runs in a gutter with a thin, constant sound. You pass windows where lamplight rests on curtains, and for a moment each room seems to contain its own private warmth, separate from the workroom yet connected by the same need for bread. Your feet take the familiar way, perhaps uphill toward Croix-Rousse, where so many silk workers have lived and worked, or along a lower street where workshops, storerooms and homes sit close together. The exact path is yours. We keep it gentle, a turn by a bakery, a narrow crossing, a wall with plaster peeling in pale flakes, the smell of soup from above, drifting down through an open window like an invitation that belongs to someone else. The city is quieter than the workshop, but not silent. Hooves strike stone, a door latch clicks, a woman calls a child indoors. Men speak in low voices outside a shop, their words softened by distance and evening air. Church bells may mark the hour, not loudly in our telling, but with a slow bronze sound that spreads across roofs and disappears into the river mist. You hear it and keep walking. Your hands are tired enough that small objects feel stronger than usual. The handle of a basket, the rough edge of a coat pocket, the smooth coin you may touch while thinking of bread or rent. After thread, everything has weight. Even air seems wider outside the loom room. You breathe it in, and though it carries smoke and damp stone, it feels cool against the throat. In Lyon, silk has made many lives precise. It has shaped streets, wages, quarrels, pride, and habits of thrift. Yet tonight, for you, it is also the memory of pale lines under lamplight and the tiny pull of a knot closing correctly. History can be large in books, but in the body it often remains small. A thumb remembers pressure, an eye remembers shine, a shoulder remembers the angle of work. You may stop for bread if there is money and need. The loaf is handed over warm or nearly cool, wrapped or not, depending on the shop and the hour. Its smell is fuller than anything in the workshop, round and earthy, with a toasted edge. You carry it close. The crust presses through paper into your palm. The same fingers that tied silk all day now hold supper, and the change in texture is quietly pleasing. If rain has fallen, the street reflects lamps in broken lines. Your shoes find the drier stones where they can. A carriage passes and leaves a smell of wet leather and horse. You step aside, then continue. There is no need for haste now unless the weather insists. The day has already asked enough. The evening can be walked at the pace of tired legs and thoughts loosening one by one. The work returns in fragments as you walk. The difficult tangle afternoon, the temperamental loom near the wall, the young worker watching your hands, the last simple break under lamplight. None of these memories demand anything now. They pass through you like the muted sounds of other rooms. You have done what the day required, and if some thread breaks tomorrow, tomorrow's hands will meet it then. As you reach the quieter stretch near home, the loom room falls farther behind, though the softness of silk and the smell of oil still seem to travel in your sleeves. Home, whatever its size, receives you differently than the workshop did. The threshold is smaller, the air is less mechanical. There may be a stove, a basin, a chair, a table with marks from many meals. The room smells of food, ash, soap, damp cloth, and the day's collected lives. You enter not as a figure in history, but as someone who needs to sit, eat, warm the hands, and let the shoulders drop. If there are others, their voices meet you before their questions do. If you live alone, the quiet has another texture, personal and complete. Either way, the first moments after work are practical. Coat off, shoes checked, bread set down, water poured, a lamp adjusted. These ordinary acts are not separate from rest. They are the little hinges by which a working day turns into evening. Your fingers may be inspected without ceremony. A rough place near the nail, a dark thread of oil that soap missed, a faint redness where silk drew tight. You rub in a little fat or ointment if you have it, something plain that smells of tallow, herbs, or the cupboard where it is kept. The skin softens slightly. Tomorrow, it will be asked to do fine work again, so tonight it is given what care can be spared. Supper is taken slowly because the body asks for steadiness, not display. Soup, bread, cheese, potatoes, lentils, or whatever the household has managed. A spoon against a bowl sounds very different from a shuttle through a loom. The difference is restful. Steam touches your face. The first mouthful warms the throat and chest. You realize how hungry you were only after food begins to answer. Talk, if there is talk, stays near the ground of life. The price of coal. A neighbor's news. A child's lesson. A repair needed in a shoe. Perhaps a mention of the workshop, a troublesome warp, or a length nearly finished. You do not need to explain every knot. Those who know work understand that most of a day cannot be told exactly. It can only be carried into the room through posture, appetite, and silence. After supper, your hands may still seek occupation. Many workers who spend the day in repeated motion find stillness strange at first. You might mend a stocking, fold cloth, smooth a table edge, or simply hold a cup until it cools. The habit of usefulness lingers. We can let that linger without making it restless. The evening is a slow unwinding, and not every thread releases at once. The lamp at home is smaller than the workshop light, or perhaps it only feels smaller because it shines on fewer tasks. Its flame makes the walls warmer and the corners deeper. Outside, LYON continues in muffled layers. A footstep in the stair, a cart farther off, the river air pressing cool against shutters. Inside, the chair supports the weight the bench never fully supported, and your back begins to understand that the day is ending. Yet the loom remains somewhere in thought, waiting in darkness with its warp held steady. You can picture it without effort. The frame still, the heddles hanging, the reed quiet, the knots you made tucked among hundreds of unbroken threads. It is not an anxious picture. It is simply where your working self will return. And because the tools are in order, the image can rest. As night deepens over LYON, the loom knotter's day becomes memory in the body, and the small skills of the workshop settle into sleep's slower keeping. You prepare for bed with the same practical gentleness that guided the work. Clothes are folded or laid where morning can find them. Shoes are placed with their toes toward the room. A basin is emptied or covered. The lamp is turned lower, and its smell changes as the flame diminishes. Shadows rise along the wall. Your hands, free at last from thread, lie open for a moment in the dim light. The bed may be narrow, the blanket plain, the pillow shaped by many nights. It does not need luxury to be welcome. The body recognizes a horizontal surface after a day spent bending towards silk. When you lie down, the shoulders widen of their own accord. The neck lets go slowly. The fingers curl, then uncurl, perhaps still feeling for a thread that is no longer there. Outside, the city is not fully asleep. Few cities ever are. But its sounds come softened now, filtered by walls, distance, and the mercy of tiredness. A late step on stone, a shutter moved by wind, a low voice passing beneath the window. These sounds do not ask you to rise. They only mark the world continuing while you are allowed to drift from it. The day's images loosen their order. The workshop window, the pale warp, the hook's worn tip, the lamp glass darkened by soot, a knot closing neatly, bread in the hand, rain on stone, the young workers' watching eyes. None of them arrive sharply. They float, overlapping like translucent pieces of silk laid one over another, each one softening the next. If your fingers twitch once, it is only the work leaving slowly. The body has spent hours making careful loops, and now it repeats one in the air of sleep. There is something tender in that. Skill does not vanish when the shift ends. It follows quietly, then folds itself away until morning. You breathe in, and the blanket lifts. You breathe out, and LYON's long day moves farther from the room. Tomorrow may bring the same bench, the same looms, the same thread breaking in new places. That thought does not need to trouble you tonight. Repetition can be a burden in some lights, but in this dim room, it becomes a kind of path. You know where it begins. You know the tools waiting there. You know the pressure of silk between finger and thumb, and the small satisfaction of setting one strand right. The lamp is lowered a little more. The room takes on the color of warm ash. Your hands rest outside the blanket until the air cools them, then slip beneath for warmth. The quiet around you is not empty. It holds the workshop at rest. the city beyond the shutters, and the fine invisible line between what has been done and what can wait. Your breath follows that line without effort, and somewhere in the sleeping workshop, the loom stands ready for the morning, with the threads held in their patient order, and your small knots hidden among them like calm thoughts kept safe overnight. Before sleep takes you fully, there is one last inward walk through the room you left behind. You see the bench first, plain and low, its edge polished by sleeves. The scissors lie closed, the hook rests beside them, a twist of silk thread, too small to matter and too familiar to throw away in memory, curls near the lamp. The floorboards hold dust in their seams, and the looms stand in rows, each one larger in darkness than it seemed by day. The windows are black now, reflecting only the faint shapes inside. No shuttle crosses, no cards advance, no weaver taps fingers against the frame. The silence has settled on the machines like a cloth laid over furniture. Yet it is not abandonment, it is readiness. Workrooms have this special kind of sleep, full of tools placed where morning hands will reach for them. You can almost hear the first sound that will come tomorrow, perhaps a key in the door, perhaps the scrape of a chair, perhaps the small cough of a lamp flame taking hold. Then the looms will gather their rhythms again, one after another, until the room is full of motion. But not yet. Tonight they wait. Tonight even the threads seem to rest, stretched but still, keeping their order in the dark. Your own breathing grows slower beside that imagined stillness. The knotter's work, so precise in daylight, becomes simple at the edge of sleep. Find what has broken. Bring the ends together. Tie gently. Let the pattern continue. The lesson is not spoken aloud, and it does not need to be. It lies in the hands, in the patient muscles of the fingers, in the long kindness of doing small things well. The city beyond your room dims by degrees. Lion's stones cool. Smoke thins above roofs. The rivers move through darkness with their old steady patience. Somewhere, a late cart crosses a bridge. Somewhere, a worker in another trade sets down a tool and rubs tired palms together. The world is full of people finishing what they can, leaving the rest in order, and turning towards sleep. And you, the loom knotter of 1890s LYON, rest with silk still faintly remembered in your fingertips, not as a task now, but as a softness the day has left behind. That softness remains even when thought begins to loosen from words, because the body remembers texture long after the room has grown dark. Silk has a way of lingering in the fingertips, not as a command, but as a faint trace of smoothness against the skin. You feel it somewhere between waking and sleep, a thread that is no longer in your hand, yet still seems to pass lightly over thumb and forefinger. We stay there for a while, where the work is finished enough to rest, and remembered enough to keep its shape. In that half-dream of the LYON Loom Knotter, the day does not return sharply. It comes as pieces of touch and sound. The hook's cool handle, the tremble of the floor, the dry paper lift of jacquard cards above the frame, the small closing pull of a knot made properly. Your mind does not arrange these things in order, because sleep has no need for ledgers. It lets them drift like pale threads in low lamplight. Sometimes, before full sleep, you might remember the older stories of the trade, not as lessons recited, but as weather in the walls. LYON's silkwork is older than your own hands, older than the bench, older than many of the looms still standing in the room. The city has known silk merchants, designers, dyers, weavers, frosters, card makers, and knotters, who carried skill in their bodies as quietly as people carry a familiar street map. You belong to that line, though no one needs to name it aloud. The old canut workshops of Croix-Rousse once filled homes with tall looms, and high ceilings were built not for grandeur, but to give the machines room to breathe. You may know such rooms by family memory, by neighborhood talk, or by the sight of windows set tall in the hillside streets. The loom knotter's work fits into that older world and into the newer workshop as well. Wherever silk is stretched under tension, threads break, and wherever threads break, careful fingers are needed. There is comfort in knowing that the work has always been made of small returns. A thread breaks, you find it, a pattern falters. You restore its path. The cloth moves forward. The same truth can belong to a hand loom in an upper room, a larger workshop with several frames, or a more ordered factory floor, where the noise is heavier and the day feels more measured. Your task remains near to the silk. In sleep, the city may become quieter than it ever is in waking. The steep streets empty themselves of footsteps. The rivers lose their edges and become only dark movement beneath bridges. The workshop roof holds the night air. The looms wait without complaint. Somewhere in that waiting, the knots you tied during the day sit hidden inside the warp, each one a small place where breakage was answered with patience. And as the night passes without needing to be counted, the work waits beyond the edge of sleep, ready to gather itself again in the grey of another lion morning. The first return to morning is often a sound before it is a thought. A cart far below, a step in the building, a kettle lid shifting. The room around you is still dim, and for a few moments the body knows only warmth under the blanket and cool air around the face. Then the shape of the day comes back gently. The weaving room, the bench, the thread, the ordinary need to rise and begin again. You dress by habit, not ceremony. Stockings, shirt, skirt or trousers, waistcoat or jacket, whatever belongs to your place and season. The cloth of your working clothes is not fine silk but durable wool, linen, cotton, or mixed fabric that can bear dust and repeated wear. It feels rougher than the materials you tend all day. That contrast is familiar and perhaps useful because it keeps the body grounded before it returns to delicate thread. Breakfast, if there is time and food enough, is plain. Bread from yesterday, softened in coffee or taken with a little butter, if there is any. The cup warms your hands before the workshop does. The room smells of damp ashes stirred back toward heat, of bread crust, and of the morning cold that comes through gaps around windows. You eat slowly enough to wake, but not so slowly that the clock becomes unfriendly. Your hands receive their first attention before they return to silk. You check the nails, because a chipped edge can catch a filament and make trouble where none existed. You rub one rough place smooth with care. If the skin has cracked, you protect it as best you can, not out of vanity but practicality. A loom knotter's hands in 1890s LYON are not ornamental hands. They are instruments of feeling, and they must be kept ready. The walk back to the workshop takes you through air that may smell of coal smoke, wet stone, stable straw, or the first baking of the morning. The city is not fully awake, but it is already working in pieces. A shop shutter lifts. A delivery boy hurries with shoulders bent. A woman sweeps a threshold with brisk strokes that make a dry sound against stone. You move through it all toward the room where the looms will soon begin. When you enter, the workshop has its morning face again. Cooler, wider, less crowded by heat and noise. The looms stand in a half-light that makes their frames look almost architectural. Beams and cords and crossbars waiting for purpose. The air smells of yesterday's oil and settled dust. You breathe it in, and though it is not sweet, it belongs to the place where your hands know what to do. Your bench receives you without welcome and without resistance. It is simply there. You place your small bundle down, set your tools in order, and run a hand lightly over the work surface. A thread left from yesterday clings near a scratch. You remove it. The first acts of the day are not repairs but preparations, and preparation has its own quiet dignity. It says that work begins before anyone notices it beginning. In the 1890s LYON Loom room, morning inspections keep later troubles small. You look at the warp while the light is still gentle, checking whether the threads have shifted overnight. Dampness may have changed their tension. A knot made late yesterday may need a second glance. You lean in and let the pale lines separate in your eyes. The silence before machines start is useful, because it allows smaller signs to rise. A warp under good tension has a kind of even life in it. Not slack, not strained. When you touch it lightly, it answers with a consistent resistance, like many fine lines agreeing to the same rule. If one thread hangs differently, you see it. If two have crossed where they should not, you ease them apart before motion makes the mistake worse. There is no drama in such prevention, only the comfort of trouble avoided. The weavers arrive, and the room slowly becomes populated by gestures. Coats come off, sleeves are adjusted, lunch parcels are tucked away. Someone checks a shuttle, someone turns a beam, someone curses softly at a knot in a cord, then settles it with a laugh that barely leaves the throat. You are part of this waking, though your place is quieter than most. The loom knotter begins where order is thinnest and makes it firm. The first machine starts, then another. Sound returns by layers, as it did when it left. At first the clack seems large after the night's quiet, but the ear adjusts quickly. Soon, the rhythm is no longer an interruption, but the shape of the room itself. Your shoulders lower into it. Your hands lift the hook. A broken thread from yesterday's end has made itself known, and the new day begins with repair. And as the morning takes hold in the LYON workshop, the knotter's work opens from inspection into the long attentive practice of keeping the looms alive. The first broken thread of the day is often a good teacher. It shows you how the warp has slept. This one has parted close to the heddle, where friction and tension meet in a narrow place. You bring the end forward carefully, feeling for its mate among neighboring strands. The silk is cool, almost crisp, and the tiny fibers at the break catch the light. You breathe once, steady your fingers, and tie. A knot that is too large will announce itself later. It will catch, rub, perhaps break again, and the loom will stop with the same complaint in a sharper voice. So you make the knot small and firm, testing it with a pull no stronger than necessary. The right pressure is not measured by a tool. It is measured by years, by mistakes, by the memory of silk snapping when pride tightened the hand too much. Once the loom runs, you watch the repaired thread pass through its first motions. This is a small ritual of trust. You do not immediately turn away after tying, because a repair deserves to prove itself. The heddle lifts, the reed beats, the shuttle crosses, the thread holds. Only then do you return your attention to the wider warp, where other weaknesses may be waiting with more patience than noise. A LYON Loom knotter's skill is not only in the knot, but in the choosing of where to make it. The join must pass through the working parts without catching, and it must not leave an obvious mark in the cloth. Sometimes the broken ends allow the knot to sit in a forgiving place. Sometimes they do not, and you must draw in a longer piece, replacing more than the immediate break. The loom offers problems, and your hands answer with practical judgment. The workshop grows brighter. Daylight reaches the floor in dull rectangles, crossed by shadows from window bars and loom frames. Dust brightens in the air, then disappears when you turn your head. You hear the scrape of a stool, the creak of a treadle, the thud of a beam settling into motion. The smells sharpen as the room warms. Oil, paper, wool, silk, soap, and the faint acidity of breath in a busy room. You pause to sort several loose ends near the edge of a warp. They have not broken yet, but they have become disorderly, crossing and clinging where they should run cleanly. Your fingers separate them one by one. There is a calming pleasure in this, like combing out a tangle from hair without pulling. The threads respond when treated correctly. They lie straighter. Their shine becomes more even. The loom seems to settle. A visitor might think the loom does most of the work, because its frame is large and its motions visible. But you know how much of weaving depends on tiny acts of maintenance that never make a spectacle of themselves. A machine can repeat a motion, but it cannot care about a frayed end. It cannot feel the difference between good tension and a thread preparing to fail. That work belongs to attentive people. You are not separate from the weaver, though your tasks differ. The weaver manages the loom's operation, watches the cloth, adjusts the rhythm, and knows the behavior of the particular frame. You move in when the warp needs repair, when a stopped machine asks for a small intervention, when the threads require a patient hand. Between you there may be few words, because the collaboration has become woven into habit. When the loom resumes after your repair, its sound rejoins the workshop's larger rhythm. The joining is satisfying because it closes a gap in the room. One stopped machine makes a quiet absence that working people notice at once. When it runs again, the shared sound becomes whole. You may not think of it that way in the moment, but your body recognizes the return. It feels the balance come back. By mid-morning, the LYON Loom Knotter's attention has moved across several frames, and the day begins to show the particular character it will keep. No 2 days in the weaving room are truly the same, though from the outside they might appear nearly identical. Today the warp on the wall loom is dry and troublesome. The narrow loom near the middle runs smoothly, as if grateful for yesterday's adjustments. The larger jacquard frame has a recurring break near one set of heddles, and you keep returning to it with a watchful patience. The room develops its own weather. You carry this weather in memory as you move. Not all memory is verbal. Some of it is spatial, held in the root between benches and frames. You know where to step around the uneven board. You know which loom has a projecting peg at sleeve height. You know which worker prefers to pause fully before you reach into the warp, and which one keeps a hand on the frame until the last possible moment. A break near a pattern change requires extra care. The jacquard mechanism may be lifting a group of threads in a more complex order, and one misplaced repair can disturb the small figure being woven. You look up briefly at the cards, then back to the thread. The cards tell part of the truth. The warp tells the rest. Your hands must listen to both without making the task feel heavier than it is. The silk here is dyed a muted blue, though under the workshop light it sometimes leans toward gray. The broken end shows a paler core where fibers have parted. You bring it forward, twist, and tie. The dye leaves no obvious stain on your fingers, but the color seems to remain in the eyes. After several repairs, pale objects around you appear faintly warmed by blue, as if the day has borrowed a hidden shade. A small boy or girl may carry errands through the room, depending on the workshop's arrangements. They move carefully because the looms are not forgiving of careless sleeves. Their footsteps are lighter than the adults. They bring a message, a bobbin, a wrapped bundle, or a request from the office. You notice the quick curiosity with which they look at the machines. Everyone begins by looking, long before the hands understand. The office door opens and closes now and then. From it may come the smell of ink, paper, and colder air, because the office is not warmed by the machines in the same way. Ledgers live there, and orders, and calculations about length, price, delivery, and waste. Your work touches those numbers without entering them. Each saved thread, each repaired warp, each avoided flaw keeps the ledger's neat columns from being disturbed by loss. Still, you do not knot for the ledger in your mind. You knot because the thread is broken and must be made useful again. The reason close to the hand is enough. We stay with that closeness, because sleep likes useful things when they are described without haste. The hook catches the end. The thumb steadies it. The forefinger turns. The knot tightens. The loose tails are cut away with a whisper. At times, the workshop noise becomes so continuous that it seems almost quiet. The mind stops separating each sound and accepts the whole. In that whole, you can think small thoughts. Whether the bread will last, whether the weather will turn, whether the rough patch on your thumb needs more care. Thoughts come and go without much force, and the work continues underneath them like a steady current. As the morning deepens, the particular task of knotting begins to open into the larger process of preparing a warp, where old threads and new threads must meet. Not every day is only mending breaks. Sometimes a loom must be prepared for a new warp, and then the loom knotter's hands become central in another way. If the old warp is nearly finished and the new one is ready, the ends may be joined so the new threads can be drawn through the heddles and reed without rethreading each path from the beginning. This is slow work, but it saves a great deal of time when done well. The new warp arrives ordered and bundled, its threads held carefully so they do not become a useless cloud of silk. It may be wound on a beam or prepared in chains, depending on the workshop and the arrangement. It smells slightly different from the older warp, cleaner perhaps, with more of the dyer or storeroom in it. You touch it with respect because its order is fragile. One careless disturbance can make hours of labor unravel. To tie a new warp to an old one, you must match thread to thread across the full width. This is work made of repetition so complete that the mind can grow calm inside it. Take one old end. Take the matching new end. Tie them firmly and neatly. Move to the next. Then the next. The scale may be large, but each action remains small. And small actions are where your hands are most at home. The room adjusts around such a task. A loom being tied in is not producing cloth, so the work has a different quiet pressure. You sit or stand close to the warp beam, surrounded by hundreds of loose ends that must not be confused. The silk brushes your wrists like fine grass. Light from the window helps, but you may still need the lamp in shadowed corners. The smell of thread is fuller here, less mixed with motion and more like stored fiber. You work in sections, because the whole width would be too much to hold in thought at once. A small group is separated, aligned, and tied. Then another. Each knot must be small enough to pass through heddles and reed when the new warp is drawn forward. This is not the same as repairing one break on a running loom. It is a procession of knots, a patient bridge between what has been woven and what will be. The old warp ends have already lived through work. They may be slightly dulled, stretched, or roughened. The new ends are cleaner and more alert under your fingers. When you tie them together, you are joining two states of material, the used and the unused, the near finished and the waiting. That sounds almost poetic, but at the bench it is practical. If the knot is poor, the drawing in will fail. If the knots are good, the new warp follows the old path. There is a rhythm to this tying in that differs from repair. Repair interrupts and restores. Tying in prepares and transfers. Your hands move steadily, and because the action repeats across so many threads, your breathing settles into it. You may count softly, or not count at all. You may mark sections by touch, by pins, by small divisions in the warp. The point is not speed alone, but unbroken order. The weaver may assist, or another worker may keep the threads arranged while you tie. Cooperation here is quiet and close. A hand offers the next section. A thumb holds a crossing. A small correction is made before confusion spreads. The silk slides, catches, slides again. Every few minutes you pause and look across the tied section to see whether the knots lie evenly, like tiny pale seeds along a row. When enough knots have been made, the new warp can be drawn through. This is a delicate passage. The old threads lead, the knots pass through the heddles and reed, and the new threads follow into the loom's working order. If a knot catches, you stop and ease it through. If a thread breaks, you repair it. The process is slow, but it has a beautiful logic. The old work teaches the new work where to go, and as the new warp begins to take its place, the LYON Loom Knotter's Day shows another side of the same patient craft, one concerned not with stopping failure, but with making continuity possible. Continuity is a quiet word for what your fingers do. The cloth that was finished gives way to cloth not yet begun, and the path between them is made from hundreds of small knots. You sit in the middle of that transition, close to loose ends and ordered crossings. The workshop sounds continue around you, but your loom has its own suspended feeling. It is between tasks, between lengths, between breaths. The new warp must be tensioned gradually, too quickly, and threads may snap before the loom has properly accepted them. Too unevenly, and the fabric will show trouble later. You watch as the beam turns and the threads draw forward. The tied joins approach the heddles. Some pass cleanly. One hesitates. You bring your hook to it, ease the knot through the eye, and feel the little release when it clears. This work gives you many small satisfactions. A whole row of knots passing without trouble, a section lying smooth, a new warp spreading evenly across the width. The pleasure is not loud, and perhaps no one else would pause to admire it. But your hands know when order has been preserved. Your eyes know when a line of silk has settled correctly into the loom. That knowledge is a comfort of its own. A poorly tied warp would announce itself in frustration. Threads would catch, break, cross, and delay the first weaving. A well-tied warp begins almost politely. It allows the weaver to test the shed, pass the shuttle, adjust tension, and bring the loom into production without a quarrel. You are not the only reason for that ease. but you are one of its hidden causes, and hidden causes can be deeply steadying to think about. The new warp may be intended for a different pattern, a different fabric, or a different customer. Perhaps it will become figured silk for furnishing, or a narrow trim, or a length of patterned material for a dressmaker. You do not need to know its final room or garment. You know its beginning here. You know the feel of its unworked strength and the slight sheen that appears when the threads are laid straight. There is a smell when stored silk is first handled more fully, a faint enclosed scent of fiber, paper, and the place where it waited. It mixes with the workshop until it disappears. Your hands take on the feel of it. New silk can be lively, eager to spring away if loosened. You guide it back gently. The task is less like forcing and more like persuading a crowd of fine lines to agree. The loom's first trial movements are slow. The shed opens, and you look through the lifted threads for irregularities. The space between raised and lowered warp should be clean. If one thread is caught, it shows as a wrong crossing or a hairline disturbance. You point it out or correct it, depending on reach and custom. The weaver adjusts. The loom breathes once more into usefulness. There may be waste ends cut away after the new warp is secured. Small lengths of silk fall into a basket or onto the floor before being gathered. Even waste has texture. It clings to fingers. It shines from the rubbish as though reluctant to become useless. In a careful workshop, usable scraps are saved where they can be. The habit of saving is not miserliness only. It is respect for labor already spent. By the time the new warp is ready, the day has advanced without your noticing it fully. Tying thread to thread narrows the mind so gently that hours can pass like a spool unwinding. You straighten and find the room in another light. The windows have brightened. The noise has thickened. Your back has a long ache, and your fingers feel both tired and awake. You have built a passage no one will see. As the newly tied warp begins its first real weaving, your attention returns from preparation to watching, because the earliest moments of a new setup are full of small truth. The first inches of cloth are often watched more closely than later ones. They reveal whether the warp was arranged well, whether the tension holds, whether the pattern answers the cards and the shuttle properly. You stand near, not crowding the weaver, but ready. The threads lift, the shuttle passes, the reed beats. A few lines of fabric gather, thin at first, then more certain as the loom accepts its work. A thread breaks almost immediately, as new warps sometimes do. It is not a failure of the whole preparation. It is simply the material declaring one weak place. You step in, find the end, and tie it with the same calm as any other repair. The new silk is smoother than the old, and the knot closes with a different feel. You test it carefully, watching how it behaves on the next passage. There is a temptation, in tired workers and in hurried rooms, to blame the material, the dyer, the weather, the last person who touched the warp, or the loom itself. Sometimes blame may even be partly true, but your work does not improve by growing sharp around it. The thread before you still needs repair, so you give the immediate thing your attention and let wider judgments wait somewhere beyond the bench. The pattern begins to show. At first it looks like nothing much, only crossings and slight changes in surface. Then a figure emerges by repetition, a small leaf, a curve, a geometric border, a flower that seems plain until the light moves. You see it from the working side, which makes the beauty practical and almost secret. The loom is making what it was prepared to make, and your knots are passing through the hidden underside of it. The weaver adjusts the beat. Too firm, and the cloth may grow dense. Too light, and the structure may lack the desired body. You are not responsible for every adjustment, yet you feel the changes through the loom's sound. A sharper beat, a slower rhythm, a smoother run after tension is corrected. The room is full of such small decisions, each one made by someone close enough to the material to hear its answer. You return to the bench where another loom waits with older troubles. The new warp is now part of the room's ordinary life. That is how beginnings disappear. They become routine. The tied-in threads, once so carefully attended, now rise and fall among the others, carrying pattern forward. There is a quiet mercy in that. Good preparation becomes forgettable, because it allows the work to proceed without fuss. Your hands, however, remember the transfer. They remember the long row of knots, the sections kept aligned, the first passage through heddles and reed. This memory may help the next time a similar warp arrives. Skill accumulates not as dramatic revelation, but as a slow thickening of recognition. You have seen this before. You have felt this resistance. You have learned where to pause. That is how the loom knotter grows sure. The afternoon meal, when it comes, finds you with thread still clinging to one sleeve. You remove it and set it aside while reaching for bread. The room smells of warmed bodies and machine oil, but food adds its ordinary blessing. Bread, soup, cheese, apple, onion, whatever the day allows. The first bite pulls you out of the narrow thread world and returns you to hunger, which is another honest form of attention. Someone speaks of a shipment delayed by rain. Someone mentions a neighbor who has found work in another shop. Someone else says the new blue warp is running better now, and you hear that without turning it into pride. It is simply useful news. The workshop is a web of such remarks, practical and brief, holding the day together between the louder motions of the looms. After the pause, the afternoon resumes with the smell of coffee fading, the light shifting, and the LYON Loom Knotter's hands returning to the fine boundary between order and disorder. The hours after food are often when the body asks for mercy. A heaviness sits behind the eyes. The room's warmth settles under the collar. The bench feels harder than it did in morning. You adjust your position, roll your shoulders once, and take up the hook again. The work does not become easier because you are tired, but it can become calmer if you let the tiredness slow your hands rather than roughen them. A loom producing a darker fabric can be easier and harder at once. The thread may show against your skin, but the shadows between strands deepen, and a break can hide where the light falls poorly. You bring the lamp closer, even in afternoon, to make a small, clear field. The flame's warmth touches your knuckles. The dark silk gives off a rich, quiet sheen, like polished wood seen in low light. You find the broken end after a patient search. It has slipped behind a neighboring group and wrapped itself lightly, as though trying to become part of another path. You free it without tugging. A hard pull would disturb 3 threads instead of 1. The hook turns, the silk lifts, and the end comes forward. You match it, tie it, and feel the knot close cleanly. The repair is small, but the relief in the loom's restart is real. The industrial process around you is full of dependencies. Silk must be reeled, thrown, dyed, wound, warped, threaded, woven, inspected, finished, packed and sold. Each stage leaves conditions for the next. Your place is one of maintenance within making, a role that appears because materials are never perfectly obedient. Thread is fine, tension is persistent, motion repeats. Something will break, and someone must know how to bring it back. You do not carry the whole process in your hands, but your hands understand their part. This humility is one of the soothing truths of old work. A person does not need to be the entire craft to belong to it. You belong by knowing a narrow part deeply. The loom knotter's world is measured in broken ends, prepared warps, clean joins, and the satisfaction of cloth continuing after interruption. A little breeze touches the window and makes the lamp flame lean. The light moves across the warp, and for a moment the threads seem to breathe. Outside, perhaps clouds pass over LYON, changing the brightness without warning. The workshop notices weather more than it admits. Rain affects thread, cold affects fingers, heat affects patience. You live in those quiet exchanges between city air and working fiber. There is a kind of arithmetic to repeated repair, though you may not think of it as arithmetic. 1 minute saved here, several minutes saved there. 1 flaw prevented, 1 machine returned to work. Across a day, such small amounts gather. Across many workers and many looms, they become the difference between delay and completion. Yet the immediate act remains gentle, no larger than a knot disappearing between your fingers. The afternoon lengthens, and your hands continue their small negotiations with silk. while the room's sound folds itself into a rhythm steady enough for drowsy listening. In a quieter corner, you may be asked to sort leftover thread or prepare lengths for later repair. Not every moment is spent at an active loom. Some tasks are humble, even within humble work. You gather usable strands, align them, and wind them lightly so they will not tangle. The colors lie together in muted bundles: cream, gray, blue, brown, green, perhaps a red deep enough to look almost black in shadow. Thread storage matters because disorder spreads quickly among fine things. A loose handful can become a knot no one wants to face at the end of a long shift. So you wind gently, not tight enough to crease, not loose enough to collapse. Your fingers move in circles now instead of tying motions. The change rests some muscles and wakes others. The silk makes a soft sliding sound over itself, a private little rustle. You may cut short repair lengths for common needs, keeping them where they can be reached quickly. The scissors open and close with a sound so small it nearly vanishes under the looms. Each length is judged by habit. Too short, and it will waste time later. Too long, and it becomes inconvenient. Good work often lives in these middle measures, where nothing is excessive and nothing is lacking. A foreman or senior worker may ask about the troublesome loom. You answer simply, "The reed may need attention. The warp is dry near one section. The breaks are fewer since morning, but not gone." Your words stay close to what you have seen. There is calm authority in that kind of answer. It does not decorate itself. It has the weight of touch behind it, and touch is a reliable witness in a room of thread. The reed, when examined, is a modest object to anyone outside weaving, but to you it is full of consequence. Its fine spaces guide the warp and beat the weft into place. A rough tooth, a bent sliver, a speck of dirt lodged where silk passes can cause repeated trouble. You run a careful eye along it. Perhaps you feel, with the hook or a fine tool, for the almost invisible catch. If the rough place can be eased, it is eased. If not, the loom's problem is noted for deeper attention. The important thing is not to pretend the thread is at fault when the path itself is harming it. This is a quiet lesson beyond weaving, though we need not press it hard. Sometimes a thing breaks because it is weak. Sometimes it breaks because it has been asked to pass again and again through a place that wounds it. You return to the warp with that knowledge. The next repair may hold better now that the cause has been noticed. Or it may still require watching. The work does not guarantee reward for every act of care, but care improves the chances. That is enough for most working days. You tie, trim, and wait through 2 movements of the loom. The thread holds. The afternoon is now deep, and the light through the windows has shifted toward a softer angle. The room looks older in this light. The wood shows scratches. The metal shows dull wear. Faces show tiredness without shame. You are tired too, and still your hands know how to continue. That is the rhythm we remain inside. The rhythm of skill moving gently through fatigue. As the day moves toward its later hours, the LYON Loom Knotter's work turns again toward watching, listening, and keeping the smallest failures from growing larger. The late shift of attention is quieter than the mornings. You no longer feel the freshness of arrival, and you are not yet released by evening. This is the wide middle end of the day, where patience must be renewed without any ceremony. You sit with your feet steady on the floor and let the next task come. A broken warp end near the center, a loose edge thread, a knot that has caught and needs to be remade. Remaking a knot can feel humbling. The first repair was not enough, or the material shifted, or the knot sat poorly in the path. You do not scold the earlier hand, even if it was your own. You simply undo what can be undone, trim if needed, and make a better join. The silk does not care about pride. It responds to accuracy, pressure, and placement. The room's smells are fullest now, oil warmed by motion, lamp fuel waiting for dusk, dust stirred from boards, damp wool from coats that never quite dried, the faint sweetness of someone's apple core wrapped back into paper. These smells might seem plain in daylight, but described softly, they become the atmosphere of a working life. They tell you where you are as surely as any sign. You hear a church bell again, or perhaps only the clock inside the room. Time in workshops has several voices. The official time belongs to bells, clocks, and schedules. The practical time belongs to how much cloth has been woven, how much warp remains, how many repairs delay a loom. The bodily time belongs to hunger, ache, and the way fingers grow slower near the end. You live among all three. A small mistake can happen when the mind drifts. You catch yourself before it settles. The thread in your left hand is not the mate you need. It lies too far to one side. You pause, release it, and find the correct end. No harm has been done because the pause came soon enough. This is why unhurried work can be safer than speed. A calm hand leaves room for correction. The correct knot closes, and you smooth it down. The loose end is so fine that it clings to your thumb after being cut. You wipe it onto the cloth at your side, and it stays there like a pale eyelash. The tiny thing makes you smile inwardly, not with amusement exactly, but with recognition. Work is full of small remnants. Some are swept away. Some stay with you until evening. Another loom stops. You rise. The path to it is familiar now in late light, almost like walking through a room in your own home. You know the turn, the narrow place, the beam to avoid, the basket at the foot of the frame. The stopped loom has a broken thread near the selvage. You repair it while the weaver holds the cloth edge steady, and the two of you make one quiet gesture together. When the loom starts, the edge forms cleanly again. Edges matter because they frame the fabric's usefulness. A beautiful center with a troubled edge is not fully successful. You know this in the hand before anyone says it. The boundary must be cared for. The outer threads take strain in their own way, and you give them the same attention as those in the middle, because every part has its place. The day does not hurry, though it is moving toward evening. The workshop remains itself, and you remain within it, close to thread, close to wood, close to the small repairs that let pattern continue. There are moments when the work becomes almost meditative, though no one in the room would use that word while wages and deadlines exist. Still, the mind can quiet around repeated accuracy. Find, match, tie, test. Find, match, tie, test. The sequence is steady enough that stray worries soften at the edges. You do not forget them entirely, but they no longer take up the whole bench. The silk gives you something exact to do. That exactness is a kindness when the wider world feels less manageable. Rent, illness, prices, weather, orders, and family needs may all press at the edges of life, but the broken thread in front of you has a visible problem and a known response. You bring the ends together. You make the knot. The loom resumes. For a few breaths, the world is mended in one small place. A senior weaver may speak to you of an older method, or of how things were done in a smaller room before this workshop arranged its labor more tightly. The words come between tasks, half heard over the looms. You catch enough. Taller frames in home workshops, children winding thread, neighbors helping when a warp had to be managed. The past is not romantic in the telling. It is work remembered by those who did it. You listen because memory is part of the craft. Techniques pass through hands, but also through stories of what went wrong and what saved time. A certain kind of knot for a certain thread, a warning about damp warps, a habit of checking the reed before blaming the silk. These things do not always enter manuals. They travel in ordinary speech, in the pauses between machine sounds, in the companionship of labor. The room warms again when the lamps are lit. The flames make small golden circles, and the window glass turns reflective. Now you see parts of the workshop doubled faintly in the panes, looms behind looms, lamps behind lamps. The outside darkens, and the inside becomes more enclosed. Your world narrows to the lit threads and the sound around them, and the day's final repairs begin. Your fingers have lost some nimbleness, but they have gained caution. That is enough. A tired hand can still be a good hand if it does not pretend to be fresh. You slow the knot slightly, giving the silk time to lie correctly. The thread holds. The next one holds. The room continues in amber light, and we keep our voice low beside you, as if speaking too sharply might disturb the warp itself. The LYON Loom Knotter's evening is made of such softened attention, where effort remains but the mind moves closer to rest with every careful repair. A new worker might find evening frustrating because the same problems return. Another break, another tangle, another thread slipping out of order, just when the day should be ending. You have learned that repetition is not an insult. It is simply the nature of material under strain. A thread repaired in the morning does not promise that no other thread will break by night. The work continues because the world continues moving. You answer the next break with the steadiness it asks for. The silk is a pale gold, warmed further by lamplight, and it almost disappears against your skin. You lift it carefully and bring it across its companion. The knot forms. You trim the ends. The little off-cut falls, catches on the loom frame, and stays there until you brush it away. The repair is complete, and the loom takes it without complaint. The weaver beside this frame has been quiet all day. Some people fill a room with talk, and others with concentration. You do not require either from them. Their hand steadies the frame while yours works near the warp. The two forms of attention meet in silence. When the loom starts again, they give one short nod, and you return it. That nod contains enough: acknowledgement, relief, and the shared wish to finish well. At the bench, you take a sip of water. It tastes faintly of the cup, perhaps tin or clay, and of the room's warm dust. Still, it clears the throat. You wipe your fingers and notice how the cloth catches on a rough patch near the thumb. That spot will need tending later. For now, you flex the hand slowly and return to the work, because the next thread is already waiting. The final inspection of a prepared section may happen while lamps burn low. You run your eyes along the warp, not reading it like a book exactly, but following its lines for interruptions. One knot sits larger than the others. You remake it before it can cause trouble. This is the kind of decision that separates careful work from merely finished work. No one asked in that moment. The thread asked, and you answered. Outside the workshop, LYON's evening gathers in streets and courtyards, but inside the loom room, the day is measured by what remains to be made orderly. You feel the pull of home, yet you do not let it take your hands away too soon. The end of work deserves attention too. If left carelessly, morning begins with needless difficulty. If left well, morning can begin almost gently. A loose group of threads is tied off for the night. The knot is temporary, larger than a weaving repair, meant only to keep order while the loom rests. You mark it in your mind so it can be removed later. There are many kinds of knots in your world. Some vanish into cloth. Some guide new warp through old pathways. Some merely hold things until the next day. Each has its purpose, and while the lamps burn softly and the machines begin to slow, your hands move through these last purposes with the same calm care that carried the morning. The last purposes of the evening are often the ones that save the most trouble. Though they look like almost nothing from a doorway, you check the tied-off threads, the settled warps, the places where temporary order must hold until morning. A loose end can become a small tangle overnight if a draft moves through the room, or if someone brushes the frame before the lamps are lit again. So you give each section a final touch, light enough not to disturb it, firm enough to know it will stay. The looms quiet by degrees, and the sound that remains seems to belong more to the building than to the machines. Floorboards creak under shifting feet. A chair is lifted and set down. The office door opens, bringing a thin breath of cooler air. Someone stacks empty bobbins, and they knock softly against one another in a basket. The room, which all day has been made of motion, begins to show its still objects again. You clean the hook with a piece of cloth, drawing the fabric along the small curved tip. A little grey mark comes away, oil and dust mixed with silk powder. The scissors need less attention, but you close them carefully and wipe the blades so no gum or fiber will greet you in the morning. Tools that are neglected become troublesome in small ways. A dull blade frays what it should cut. A rough hook catches what it should guide. You have learned this without needing anyone to make it grand. The bench has gathered the day in miniature. Short silk tails, a few darker lint specks, a crumb from noon, a pin, a twisted repair length too frayed to keep. You brush the surface with your palm, then with the cloth, and the little remnants gather at the edge. They are not beautiful in themselves, perhaps, yet they carry the evidence of many saved interruptions. The room's larger order depends on such small sweepings. If a lamp is near your place, you lower it only after the bench is ready. Flame gives work its last permissions. Under that warm light, the threads still on your sleeve shine briefly before you pluck them away. The glass chimney smells of heat and soot, and when the flame is turned down, the room seems to exhale. Shadows broaden under the loom frames. The day is not gone, but it has loosened. A weaver at the next frame speaks of the morning's first task. The new warp should be watched again. The blue thread near the middle may still be delicate. The wall loom needs the reed checked before work begins. You answer softly, fitting these details into the practical place in your memory. There is always a small inheritance from one day to the next. Work never ends in a sealed line. It leaves instructions. You take one last look along the row of looms. In evening stillness, the jacquard card chains hang like quiet ladders, their punched holes meaningless until motion returns. The cords rest. The heddles hang in layered rows. The reeds hold their narrow spaces. The warps stretch forward in disciplined lines, some pale, some dark, some dyed with colors that the low lamp cannot fully reveal. All of it waits with a patience almost deeper than sleep, and when the workshop has been placed into waiting, the LYON Loom Knotter steps back from the bench, leaving the tiny repairs hidden in the silence of the looms. The next morning will not remember your tiredness, only your order. That is one of the plain truths of workshop life. If the tools are clean, the threads secured, and the notes held properly, morning receives you kindly. If not, morning begins with confusion, and confusion is heavier before breakfast. So the care you give at night is a kindness to your future hands, and we can let that kindness rest quietly in the room. Your coat waits on its peg, holding the faint chill of the wall. When you put it on, it smells of outside air from the morning, workshop dust from the day, and the wool's own dry warmth. The fabric settles across your back, and for the first time in hours, your shoulders are covered without needing to lean toward work. You flex your fingers once more, not to tie, but simply to feel them return to themselves. The staircase down from the workshop may hold the day's last shared sounds. Boots on worn treads, a cough echoing against plaster, a low voice discussing whether rain will come before morning. The air grows cooler with each step, and by the time the outer door opens, the evening enters fully, damp and smoky and alive with the city's slower traffic. You cross the threshold with the loom room still clinging to you like fine dust. Outside, LYON has changed its colors. The grays of morning have deepened into blue, brown, and amber, where lamps catch wet stone and shop windows show brief warm interiors. You walk with other workers for a while, then paths divide according to homes, errands, and habits. The street is not a stage. It is a corridor of ordinary lives, each person carrying a day's labor in the body. Your hands feel larger in the cold. After the delicate scale of silk, the world's objects return with their fuller textures. A door handle is blunt and cool. A basket handle presses into the palm. A coin is hard, edged, and definite. Bread crust scratches through its wrapping. The body welcomes these stronger sensations because they ask less precision. They remind you that not every touch must be as careful as thread. A small purchase may be made if the household needs it. Bread, a little fuel, a bit of cheese, an onion, a candle, whatever fits the wage and the week. The shopkeeper raps slowly, perhaps speaking of the weather or a rumor about orders in the silk trade. You listen with the tired attention of someone still half in the workshop. The words pass through you, but the smell of the shop remains. Wax, paper, flour, wood, and the human warmth of a room that has not yet closed. The rivers are close even when you do not see them. Their dampness lives in Lyon's air, especially in evening. It settles in seams, hair, and stone, and it can make the night feel colder than the number on any thermometer would suggest. You draw the coat closer and keep walking. Somewhere beyond the buildings, water moves under bridges with a steadiness older than the looms, older than the streets, older than silk in the city. The workshop day fades slowly as you pass through these streets. Its sounds do not stop at the door. They repeat in the ear as a softened rhythm, clack and hush, lift and beat, stop and resume. Your fingers, tucked inside a pocket or folded around a parcel, still know the motion of the knot. Thumb over forefinger, a turn, a pull, then nothing. The motion dissolves before it can become work again. And as the evening carries you home, the craft of the 1890s LYON Loom Knotter continues inwardly. Not as labor now, but as a quiet pattern left behind by repetition. Some nights, sleep comes quickly because the body has been used well. Other nights, the mind lingers around small unfinished things. The wall looms reed, the delicate blue warp, the young worker's knot that looked a little large near the edge. You may think of these while undressing, while eating, or while warming your hands around a cup. The thoughts are not sharp. They are like loose threads laid across a table, waiting to be gathered in the morning. Your evening room has fewer sounds than the workshop, and each one arrives more clearly. A spoon against a bowl, a chair leg moving on the floor, water poured into a basin, fabric shaken out before being folded. If there is family, voices overlap gently. If there is solitude, the fire or lamp becomes companion enough. You do not need a grand rest after a day of fine work. You need warmth, food, and time for the hands to open. When you wash, the water clouds faintly as dust and oil leave your skin. Silk powder is so fine that it seems almost imagined until it gathers in cloth and creases. The soap's smell may be plain, perhaps lie sharp, perhaps softened with something herbal if the household has it. You clean under the nails carefully. Tomorrow's thread will find any roughness you leave behind, and your hands deserve this small mercy. If you rub a little grease or salve into the skin, the motion is slower than knotting. Palm across knuckle, thumb along thumb, finger by finger. The rough spots drink it in. A split near the nail stings for a moment, then settles. These are humble attentions, but the craft depends on them. A loom knotter's eyesight and hands are tools that cannot be hung on the wall and replaced when neglected. The meal returns you fully to the human scale. Steam, salt, bread, a warm bowl, the soft chew of cooked vegetables, the sharpness of cheese, perhaps a sip of thin wine or water. The mouth, after a day of dust and thread, receives taste as its own kind of rest. You eat without hurry when you can. Each bite is a small answer to the hours when hunger waited politely behind the work. There might be talk of wages, because working life cannot be separated from them. A day's skill becomes coins, and coins become rent, food, fuel, cloth, medicine, candles, and the many quiet needs of a household. Yet in this script we keep the talk low and unhurried. Money is present, as weather is present. It shapes the room, but it does not have to sharpen the tone. The night remains soft around it. If a neighbor stops by, their knock is known before the door opens. News travels in such rooms by footsteps, baskets, shared errands, and borrowed things returned late. Someone may ask about the workshop. You say, the new warp took well, though the blue thread still needs watching. That is enough. People who work understand that a whole day can be held in one practical sentence, and the rest left to the hands. Later, when the room grows quieter, you may mend something of your own. The irony is gentle. After a day of tying silk too fine for most eyes, you take up a stocking, a shirt cuff, a torn seam, or a loose button. The thread is coarser, the needle heavier, the cloth more forgiving. Your fingers move with less strain, and the household mending feels almost broad and rustic after the fineness of the loom. The needle passes through fabric with a soft pop. The thread pulls after it in a short line. You smooth the seam with your thumb. This work is different, yet related. It also asks that broken or parted things be brought together. It also rewards patience over force. The world is full of small repairs, some paid, some unpaid, some visible, some hidden inside the way a garment continues to be worn. As night settles deeper, the LYON Loom Knotter's world narrows again to lamplight, hand warmth, and the plain room where the day's labor becomes quiet enough to sleep beside. The lamp at home does not need to illuminate a warp, so it can be softer. Its light rests on the table, on the edge of a bowl, on folded fabric, on your hands now slower than they were in the workshop. Shadows gather in the corners without threat. Outside, the city speaks through walls in softened tones. A late cart, a door below, someone laughing far enough away that the sound arrives rounded and harmless. You may sit for a while doing nothing that produces anything. That can be harder than it sounds for hands trained by necessity. They search for occupation, then gradually accept rest. One hand lies over the other. The thumb feels the roughened skin where thread passed all day. The fingers curl, not around silk, but around warmth. This is also part of the work cycle, because without rest, care becomes clumsy. The thought of the loom returns, but less as duty now. You picture the warps in darkness, the knots made today holding their places among hundreds of straighter threads. The image is oddly peaceful. A knot is a small interruption made useful. It admits that a break happened, then lets the thread continue. Perhaps that is why the work suits the night so well. It knows how to repair without making noise. Sleep approaches through ordinary preparations. A cup set aside, the lamp lowered, clothing placed where morning can find it, shoes near the bed, window checked against the damp. These actions are plain, but they have rhythm, and rhythm is the companion of sleep. You move through them with the same unannounced care that guided the hook through silk, letting one act follow another until the room is ready. In bed, the body releases the workshop in layers. First the feet, which held the floor's tremor, then the knees and hips, stiff from standing and sitting close, then the shoulders, which carried the long lean toward the warp. Finally the hands, which have the hardest time surrendering. They twitch once, perhaps twice, and then settle. The blanket presses lightly over them, and that pressure is broad, warm, and kind. The mind may make one final pass through the day's repeated actions. Find the end, find the mate, turn, draw, tighten, smooth. The sequence slows as sleep thickens. It no longer belongs to a loom, but to breath itself. Inhale, pause, exhale, settle. We remain beside you only as a quiet guide now, letting the work become a lullaby made of practical gestures and remembered texture. And while the LYON night moves over roofs, rivers, workshops, and sleeping streets, your hands rest from silk, gathering strength for another morning's careful thread. Morning returns again, because long work is not a single day, but a chain of days joined as neatly as warp to warp. You wake before the room is fully bright, and the air has the gray chill that belongs to early hours. The body protests gently, then remembers its purposes. There is water to warm if fuel allows, clothes to put on, food to take, and the walk back through stone streets toward the looms. Some mornings, fog lies low along the river and climbs into the streets. It softens the edges of buildings and gives the lamps a pale halo. Your breath shows briefly. The air tastes damp, with coal smoke caught inside it. LYON in such weather feels close and muffled, as if the city itself has wrapped a cloth around its shoulders. You walk carefully over stones that may be slick with dew or soot-black moisture. In the workshop, damp weather has arrived before you. The threads feel different at once. They are less crisp, more inclined to cling. The warp may behave with a slight heaviness, and the room's dust has settled darker on wood. You remove your coat and touch the silk. It answers with a cool smoothness, but beneath that smoothness is a hint of drag. The day will require a different hand. A good loom knotter does not treat every morning the same. The craft is repetitive, but not blind. In damp air, you separate threads more deliberately. You make sure a pair is truly free before tying. You watch for fibers that cling together near the reed. The knot itself may close more softly, and the trimmed ends may lie flatter. These changes are small, yet small changes are the substance of your work. The looms begin, and their sound is slightly altered by the weather. Wood carries dampness. Leather straps move with a different feel. Paper cards may seem less crisp. The entire room has a muted tone, as though the fog outside has entered the mechanisms and asked them to speak lower. You listen, adjusting your expectations. A thread that would have snapped yesterday may cling today, while another may fray under the same repeated rub. The first trouble comes from two threads stuck together just enough to disturb the shed. The weaver notices the imperfect opening before the shuttle can run cleanly. You step in and separate them with the hook. The silk resists lightly, then releases. There is a faint sound, almost like peeling a fine strand from wet glass. You smooth both threads and watch the next movement. The shed opens clearly. The shuttle passes. Such moments teach you that a loom is not one machine only. It is wood, metal, cord, paper, thread, moisture, heat, hands, eyes, habits, and weather, all negotiating every hour. The industrial process may be described in firm words by those who write reports, but inside the room it is more living and responsive. You do not control every part. You tend the relationships between them with attention. As the damp morning continues, the LYON Loom Knotter's routine becomes especially careful around separation, tension, and the quiet prevention of snags. The lease rods are useful companions in such weather. They preserve the order of crossings, keeping threads from becoming an indistinct mass. You trace a group back to the lease when you need certainty, letting the crossing show which strand belongs where. The rods are smooth from handling. Their wood smells faintly of age, dust, and the oil of many hands. They do not look clever, but they keep confusion from spreading. A broken thread in damp air may not fly loose as sharply as in dry air. It may droop and cling near its neighbors, hiding its true path. You follow it patiently, lifting one strand, then another. Your finger pads feel the difference between a true end and a neighboring thread merely drawn aside. The lamp helps, though morning light is growing. Its warm circle reveals the tiny shadow where the break has curled under. You tie the knot with less moisture than usual, because the air has already softened the fibers. Too much would make the thread heavy at the join. Your tongue touches the end barely, or perhaps not at all, depending on what your fingers tell you. This is judgment beyond instruction. Someone can teach the knot, but the room teaches when to change it. The silk teaches most of all. The smell of damp wool becomes stronger as workers arrive with coats touched by fog. It mixes with coal smoke caught in the fabric and the ever-present oil of the looms. The workshop windows bead slightly at the edges, and the glass looks colder than the air. You hear boots scrape more slowly, perhaps because everyone has walked through wet streets. Morning greetings are subdued, wrapped in the same grey weather as the city. A loom near the center begins to break threads repeatedly. You watch it through several motions before touching anything. Observation saves labor when it is patient. The breaks are not random. They come near one passage, one narrow place. You lean in, feel along the path, and find a minute roughness where the silk has been dragged again and again. The surface is almost smooth, but almost is not enough for silk. The repair begins before the knot. You ask for the loom to remain still. With care, you clear the tiny rough place, or mark it for someone with the proper tool if it needs more than you can safely do. Then you tie the broken thread. If the cause remains, the knot is only a temporary kindness. If the cause is eased, the knot becomes part of a better order. The distinction matters, even when no one writes it down. The loom restarts, and you stay near. One passage, another, another. The thread holds. You feel the satisfaction quietly, like warmth under the ribs. It is not triumph. It is simply the pleasure of having listened correctly. In a room full of repeated motion, correct listening is a form of craft as real as the knot itself. By mid-morning, the fog outside thins a little, and the workshop begins to brighten, though the dampness remains woven into the day's work. Light comes through the windows as a pale wash rather than clear beams. The silk reflects it gently, without sharp glare. This helps your eyes in one way and hinders them in another. Fewer bright dazzles, but fewer hard shadows to reveal breaks. You adjust by leaning closer and letting your fingers confirm what the eye suspects. The body divides the task. Eyes find the difference. Fingers prove it. You move to the newly tied warp from the earlier day. It has settled overnight and now reveals which knots were most successful. Most have passed through cleanly. A few need trimming where tiny ends stand proud. You take the scissors and remove only what is necessary. The sound is nearly lost under the looms, but you feel each cut in the hand. A good trim makes the join less likely to catch and the thread more likely to vanish into service. One knot has failed. The thread hangs loose, its repair undone by motion, moisture, or a weakness in the end itself. You do not resent it. Failed repairs are part of learning a warp's character. You draw in a better length, making the join in a more forgiving place. The new knot sits smoother. You test it, wait, and then let the loom's movement prove whether your answer was right. The weaver, watching the cloth, points to a faint irregularity. It is hardly visible, but the trained eye catches it. You both lean in. The cloth smells faintly warm from the loom's motion, and the surface holds a sheen like still water. The flaw may be from a missed thread, a tension difference, or an earlier moment of disorder. Together, without many words, you trace the possibility backward toward the warp. This is slow detective work, though we keep it soft. No drama is needed. The fabric shows a sign, and you follow the sign back through thread and mechanism. The answer, when found, is small. One thread has been riding slightly wrong, not broken but displaced enough to alter the surface. You correct its path. The next inches form more cleanly, and the cloth's quiet beauty returns to itself. In such moments, the LYON Loom Knotter's work touches inspection, diagnosis, and repair all at once. These are modern words perhaps, but the practice is old. You see what is wrong, find where it begins, and restore the path. The fact that the work is delicate does not make it fragile in spirit. It is steady. It trusts the patient eye more than the hurried conclusion. A younger worker may ask how you noticed the displaced thread. You answer with what can be said. The shine was uneven. The shed looked narrow. The thread sat too high. Yet some of the answer cannot be given in words. It lives in years of looking until the eye knows what does not belong. You can explain the signs, but the seeing itself must grow through repetition. And as the morning's dampness slowly gives way to a brighter hour, the workshop shifts again, and your hands follow the changing mood of silk, wood, and light. By midday, the fog has lifted enough for the windows to show a clearer sky. The room warms, and threads that clung earlier begin to loosen. This change brings its own problems. A warp that behaved under dampness may become more lively as the air dries. Tension shifts slightly. A knot tied in one atmosphere must pass through another. You notice the difference first in the way threads separate under your finger. The noon pause comes with the relief of changing posture. You sit back from the loom and let your eyes look farther than arm's length. The room seems larger when you are not focused on the warp. Loops of cord above, beams crossing overhead, workers moving in aisles, baskets beneath frames, light on the floor, dust along the baseboards. The world widens from thread to room, and the widening is restful. Your meal tastes different after a damp morning. Bread has softened slightly in its cloth. Cheese smells stronger. Coffee, if there is any, seems especially welcome for its heat and bitterness. You hold the cup and feel steam touch your face. Around you, others eat with the quiet urgency of people who know the pause is limited but necessary. Conversation rises, then falls, then rises again in small practical waves. Someone mentions that damp days are better for some threads and worse for others. Another says dry days break everything. A third answers that every day breaks something, which is closer to the truth and said without sharpness. You smile if you hear it. Work teaches such modest philosophy. Every day brings its own form of trouble, and the task is to meet today's trouble rather than wish for a perfect day that never comes. After food, you wipe your fingers carefully. Grease from cheese or soup cannot be carried onto silk. A worker's meal and a worker's material must be kept apart, however close they live in time. You clean under the thumb, along the forefinger, around the nail. The cloth you use is rough, but effective. When the fingers feel ready, you take up the hook again, and the afternoon begins. The first afternoon repair is on a dry-feeling strand that must have been weakened before the weather changed. It parts near your hand as you separate it, almost politely, as if admitting what it had been hiding. You draw both ends forward. The silk surface is slightly abraded, and the break blooms into fine fibers. You trim back to a cleaner place, add a short repair length, and tie with measured gentleness. A short repair length creates 2 knots instead of 1, so both must be placed with care. You choose positions where they can pass without catching and where they will not trouble the cloth. The thread between them must match enough in color, twist, and weight to serve quietly. Repair is not simply joining what is present. Sometimes it is adding a small piece of future stability between 2 tired ends. This kind of mending requires preparation from earlier, those cut lengths wound and stored for use. Now they prove their worth. You select one by color and feel, not only by sight. A thread too smooth, too heavy, or too differently twisted may solve one problem and create another. The correct piece seems to disappear among its neighbors even before it is tied. That is how you know it belongs. As the afternoon settles, the LYON Loom Knotter's work moves through these finer judgments, each one small, each one carrying the cloth a little farther. There is a hush inside, concentration even when the room is loud. You enter it while making the double repair. The surrounding clatter remains, but it moves to the edge of attention. The 2 knots, the replacement length, the path through heddle and reed, the first test movement. These become the whole world for a minute. When the repair holds, sound returns fully, as though someone has opened a door you had not noticed closing. The cloth on this loom is meant to have a smooth face, so any disturbance would be unwelcome. You watch the repaired thread pass several times. The surface remains even. The weaver examines it with a hand hovering just above, not pressing. Touch can mark some fabrics if careless. The eye must often do what the finger wants. Both of you seem satisfied, and the loom continues into its steady afternoon labor. A spool slips from someone's hand and rolls under a bench. The sound is small, a wooden rattle fading into dust. A worker retrieves it with a sigh, then laughs at themselves. Such interruptions keep the room human. Machines may repeat, but people drop things, stretch, mishear, grow hungry, remember errands, and glance toward windows when light changes. You do these things too. The work is precise, but the worker remains wholly human. The damp morning has left some threads more compliant and others strangely weakened. You learn the day's pattern as it unfolds. Near the wall, fewer breaks now. Near the center, more fraying. On the new warp, knots passing well, except in one narrow group. You carry this map in your mind, updating it without writing. If someone asks where trouble is likely, your hand can almost point before your words arrive. A short rest for the eyes becomes necessary. You look down at the floorboards, instead of out the window, because the brightness has grown stronger. The boards are marked by years of use. Scratches, dark stains near machine feet, pale dust in seams, a place where a knot in the wood looks like an old eye. Your vision softens there. After a moment, you can return to the warp without the thread swimming. The workshop clock marks time with a sound you mostly ignore until the room's rhythm thins around it. Its tick is small and stubborn. It measures every knot the same, whether simple or difficult, successful or remade. Working time does not feel so even. Some minutes vanish in flow. Others stretch around a stubborn tangle. The clock keeps its own truth, and your hands keep another. You move again to the jacquard loom, where a floral pattern is forming in subdued colors. The cards advance overhead with their dry lift, directing threads into leaves and stems. The design is complex, but your repair is particular. A single warp end, dull green, has broken near the back. You follow it through shadow and tension, bring it forward, and choose a repair point that will not spoil the figure. Green silk under workshop light can be deceptive. It darkens in shadow, and flashes yellow at certain angles. You turn your wrist slightly to see the strand against your sleeve. There it is, clear enough. You tie, trim, and smooth. The knot disappears into the pattern's underside. The cloth continues making its leaves, each one dependent on many such hidden acts of maintenance. Late afternoon approaches, and the room begins to carry the day's weight again. The air thickens with heat and use. The smell of oil is stronger near the moving parts. Workers speak less. You feel the familiar ache across the upper back. It is not sharp, only persistent. You shift, stretch your fingers, and let the next call come when it comes. There is still work enough for the hours remaining, and as the damp day turns toward evening, the LYON Loom Knotter's attention becomes both slower and deeper, listening for the small signs that survive beneath fatigue. Fatigue changes the scale of everything. A spool seems farther away, the scissors feel heavier. A thread that would have been obvious in morning hides more successfully in the late light. You know this, so you compensate with ritual. Tools in exact places. Eyes rested when needed. No knot tied while irritation is still in the hand. The routine protects the work from the worker's weariness, and that is one of its quiet strengths. The next break comes in a narrow border, where the pattern repeats tightly. Borders are unforgiving because their regularity makes any flaw easy to see. You lean close, almost feeling the heat of the cloth and the loom together. The broken thread is red-brown, the color of polished chestnut in lamplight. You find its path by tracing the repeat, matching position as much as color. Then you tie it into place. The knot must be small, but the thread is slightly more wiry than the pale silk you handled earlier. It resists the turn. You adjust pressure, neither forcing nor yielding too much. The fibers settle. The knot draws closed. You test it through the first lift, then the next. It passes. Your shoulders lower a little, and the border resumes its quiet count across the cloth. A worker passes behind you carrying a bundle of empty bobbins. The wood taps lightly with each step. The sound reminds you of rain starting on a roof, irregular at first, then fading as they move away. Your senses take these small impressions without needing to keep them. Workrooms are full of passing textures, a sleeve brushing cord, a shoe on dust, a breath near a lamp flame, paper cards shifting overhead. The evening lamps are lit earlier on damp days, even if the sky has not fully darkened. Their glow changes the room from grey to amber, and the threads respond by changing color. Pale silk warms, blue deepens, green turns inward, red grows quieter and richer. You do not simply see these changes, you work with them. Color affects how quickly you can identify a thread, especially when many lie close together. Your eyes grow tired, but they are not alone. Fingers confirm. The hook extends reach. The memory of the threading guides you when light is poor. You use every form of knowledge available, each one taking a little burden from the others. This is how skilled work survives imperfect conditions. It does not wait for ideal light, perfect thread, or a rested body. It adapts softly, within the limits of care. Another temporary tie is needed before night. A section of warp must be secured so it will not loosen while the loom rests. This knot is larger, easier, and almost relaxing after the tiny repair knots. You wrap the group gently, tie it, and leave enough length to undo it without cutting. It is a holding knot, not a hidden knot. It says, wait here, stay in order. Morning will come. The phrase is not spoken aloud, of course, yet your hands say it to the threads. Stay in order. Morning will come. Much of workshop practice is a conversation with materials carried on without language. Wood asks not to be struck wrong. Silk asks not to be pulled too hard. Metal asks to be kept clean. Paper cards ask to be protected from damp and rough handling. You answer as best you can. As the looms begin their last measures of the day, the 1890s LYON workshop gathers itself into lamplight, and your work turns toward leaving everything ready. The final checking of the new warp is slower than it would be at noon. You are careful because the end of a damp day can hide looseness that morning will punish. The tied sections are secure. The knots that pass through the reed are trimmed. The problem group near the middle is marked in memory. You run your hand close to the threads without pressing, feeling the air around them shift as they tremble from nearby motion. A broken end appears just as you are about to move away. It hangs so plainly that it almost seems to be asking for attention. You smile inwardly at the timing. The work has a way of calling you back at the edge of departure. You return, sit, and take the two ends between your fingers. There is no resentment in the motion. A final knot is still a knot, deserving the whole skill of your hand. The thread is pale, and under lamplight it looks warmer than it did by day. You tie it cleanly. The scissors close. The loose ends fall. The repaired strand is placed back among its neighbors, and for a moment you cannot find it again, which is the best sign. A good repair does not ask to be remembered by sight. It asks only to hold. The room quiets around you. One loom stops. Another continues a few more minutes, then settles. The jacquard cards hang without movement. The last shuttle is lifted out and placed aside. The floor loses its tremor slowly, as if the building needs time to believe the machines have stopped. In the hush that follows, everyone seems to hear their own tiredness more clearly. You wipe the bench again, gather tools, and secure the lamp. The damp day has made the cloth in your hand feel slightly clammy. It still removes dust well enough. A small green thread clings to your sleeve, and you leave it there for a moment before plucking it away, perhaps because its color is pleasing in the lamplight. Then it goes with the other remnants. Work leaves beauty even in sweepings, though no one keeps all of it. Before leaving, you glance once more at the wall loom and its troublesome reed. Tomorrow, perhaps, it will need closer attention, or perhaps the adjustment made today will ease it. The uncertainty is ordinary. You do not need every answer tonight. You need only to carry the right questions into morning. This is another form of rest, knowing what can wait without being forgotten. And with the looms settled, the tools placed, and the damp threads held in their careful order, the LYON Loom Knotter steps once more from the warm workshop toward the cool breath of evening. The street receives you with wet stone and softened lamps. Rain may have fallen while you worked, leaving the city polished in broken patches. Your shoes make a faint sound on the pavement, and the air smells of smoke pressed low by dampness. The workshop noise fades behind the closed door, but not immediately from the body. The shoulders still expect vibration. The ears still hold the clatter. The fingers still remember silk. You walk more slowly than in the morning. There is no need to spend strength quickly now. Other workers move in the same direction for a while, their figures dark against shop lights. A few words pass among you, mostly about weather, food, or whether tomorrow will be clearer. The talk is mild because everyone is tired. Tiredness can make speech honest in a small way, stripping it down to what is useful and kind. At a corner, the smell of roasting chestnuts or warm bread may drift from a stall or shop, depending on the season. It cuts through the damp with sudden comfort. You breathe it in and keep walking, or perhaps stop if coins allow. Warm food in the hand after fine cold work is a particular pleasure. It fills the palm broadly, nothing delicate about it, and the heat reaches stiff fingers through paper or cloth. The rivers are darker tonight. You may hear one before seeing it, water moving against stone, carrying the city's reflections in broken pieces. LYON silk trade has always lived with these waters, with movement, transport, dampness, and the long patience of a city built where rivers meet. You are not thinking all this in formal words. You simply feel the moisture in the air and know it will matter to tomorrow's thread. Home comes by familiar turns. A stair, a corridor, a door whose latch has its own small resistance. Inside, warmth meets you if the fire has held, or cold meets you first and warmth must be made. Either way, the room is yours in a way the workshop is not. It holds private disorder, private habits, private rest. You set down what you carry and let the day slide from your shoulders by degrees. The hands are washed again, and this time the water feels especially good. Damp workshop dust has settled into the skin differently than dry dust. It leaves a faint grayness in the basin. You clean slowly, feeling each finger return from its long obedience. The rough patch near your thumb stings, then calms. You dry the hands thoroughly because damp skin cracks more easily in cold air. The evening meal tastes of shelter. Even if it is plain, it belongs to the hours after labor, and that gives it depth. You chew, swallow, and feel the body's attention move inward. Outside sounds become less commanding. The mind stops measuring thread. The shoulders remember they can rest against a chair back. The lamp flame at home does not ask you to see tiny things, and that is a kindness. If rain continues, it taps lightly at the window or runs from the roof in thin lines. The sound is softer than looms and easier to follow into drowsiness. It makes the room feel held. You might think briefly of the workshop warps absorbing damp in the dark, of the temporary ties holding sections in place, of the tools lying dry on the bench. Then the thought fades, because nothing more can be done tonight. And while rain or mist moves through the Lion streets, the loom knotter's hands rest in the small warmth of home, letting the day's fine tensions slowly loosen. The next stretch of days brings its own changes, because silk work follows not only hours, but seasons. In colder months, the workshop air can bite at the fingers before lamps and bodies warm it. In warmer months, heat gathers beneath the ceiling, and dust sticks more readily to skin. You learn both discomforts without making a story of hardship each time. They are conditions of the room, like the height of a bench or the position of a window. On a cold morning, the first knots are harder because the fingers are less willing. You rub them together before touching the warp, warming the joints, waking the skin. Breath shows faintly if the room has not yet warmed. The metal scissors feel unfriendly at first. The hook is cold enough to make the fingertips shrink from it. Then work begins, and gradually the hands create their own heat through motion. Cold silk has a clear feel. It lies smooth, but with a certain brittleness in the imagination. Whether or not it is truly brittle, you treat it with added care. The threads may snap more sharply if the air is dry. A broken end can spring back and hide among its neighbors. You follow it patiently, waiting for your fingers to become sensitive again. Warmth returns not all at once, but through repeated contact. A warmer day brings other troubles. The room grows close. The smell of oil thickens. Sleeves are rolled if custom allows, and collars loosen where they can. Sweat must be kept from the silk, so you are mindful of your hands and brow. The fabric being made may be finer than anything you wear, yet it passes through a room where workers must manage heat, thirst, and fatigue with practical calm. In summer, open windows admit street sounds more clearly. Vendors, wheels, children, distant bells, the call of someone passing below. They also admit dust, warm air, and sometimes the smell of horses or river mud. The workshop becomes more connected to the city, less sealed. You may hear lion while tying a knot, and the knot may hold inside cloth destined far beyond the city's streets. Season by season, the loom knotter learns that no thread exists apart from air. Humidity, temperature, light, storage, dye, twist, age, tension, and handling all meet in the moment a strand breaks or holds. The science of it may be described by others in more formal language, but your knowledge is tactile. You know by the drag under the finger, the sound of the break, the shine of the fiber, the temper of the warp. That tactile knowledge deepens without announcing itself. A year of work does not end with a certificate in the hand. It ends with more accurate fingers. You find breaks sooner. You waste less thread. You place knots where they travel better. You sense which loom needs watching and which one will run. Your skill becomes quieter as it improves, because less obvious effort is needed to do the same careful thing. And as the seasons pass through the high windows of the LYON workshop, the knotter's routine remains steady, adapting gently to cold, heat, damp, and dry air. There are days when dyed silk changes the feeling of the work more than weather does. Dark threads hide breaks in shadow. Bright threads dazzle the eye. Multicolored warps require attention, not only to position but to sequence of color, because a wrong replacement may betray itself later in the pattern. You learn to keep colors distinct even under poor light. The eye compares, the finger confirms, and memory holds the arrangement. A deep black silk can be the hardest at dusk. It drinks lamplight and conceals the fine hairs of a break. You place a pale cloth behind it if possible, or turn the thread against the light until its edge appears. The black silk has a smoother, more secretive presence than pale warp. It seems almost weightier, though the thread itself may not be. When tied well, the knot disappears into darkness before the loom even moves. A pale cream silk is honest in another way. It shows every rough fiber, every smudge, every imperfectly trimmed end. Your hands must be especially clean. The bench must be free of dark dust. The repair length must match closely, because even a slight difference can show as the cloth grows. Pale work asks for cleanliness not as an ideal, but as a practical demand. You meet it with quiet diligence. Some dyed threads smell faintly different, especially when recently prepared. The scent is not always pleasant or unpleasant, just present. Dye houses have their own strong world of vats, mordants, steam, and color fixed through skill and labor. By the time thread reaches you, most of that world has been rinsed and dried away. Yet a trace may remain. You catch it when leaning close, a mineral or earthy note beneath the silk. The colors give the workshop moments of subdued beauty. A row of prepared threads may look like a narrow garden laid across a beam. Green, wine, smoke blue, gold, brown, ivory. But you do not gaze at them as decoration for long. Each color has work to do. It must rise, sink, cross, and hold. Beauty in the loom room is always tied to function, and perhaps that makes it easier to trust. When a colored thread breaks, matching matters. You select from stored repair lengths, comparing under the best light available. A near match may be acceptable in one hidden area and unacceptable in another visible figure. You judge according to the cloth, the position, the pattern, and the eye that will later inspect it. This judgment is not dramatic. It is the slow accumulation of many small visual decisions. The knot closes around a burgundy thread, and for a moment the color warms your fingers. You trim the ends and smooth them down. The repaired thread returns to the warp, one dark line among many. Later, in the finished cloth, it may help form a petal, a border shadow, or a small repeating figure no one will connect to your hand. That is enough. The work has entered the pattern. As colors move through the LYON looms, your role remains the same, and yet never exactly the same, because every thread brings its own way of being handled. Some threads are thrown tighter, giving them a firmer twist that resists fraying, but may feel springier under the fingers. Others are softer and more willing, but their fibers open easily when broken. You do not need to speak of twist counts or technical measures unless asked. Your fingers know the difference as texture. One thread wants a snug, quick knot. Another wants a slower turn. A third must be trimmed back before it can be trusted. The workshop may receive silk from different suppliers, and each lot carries its own character. Even when two bundles are meant to be the same, they may not behave exactly alike. One runs smoothly for days. Another causes muttered complaints by noon. Such differences become part of the room's conversation. Workers speak of thread as if speaking of temperament, and in a practical sense, that is what they experience. You learn not to blame yourself for every break, but also not to dismiss them carelessly. The middle way is best. If many threads fail in one area, look for a cause. If one thread fails cleanly after long use, repair it and continue. If knots catch repeatedly, change the placement or examine the path. This calm inquiry keeps frustration from clouding the hand. Silk does not respond well to irritation. A small magnifying glass might be available in some workshops, or an experienced worker may simply rely on eye and touch. If you use glass, the fiber becomes a small landscape of strands and roughened ends. But most of your work happens without such enlargement. The eye leans close, the lamp is adjusted, the fingertip reads what sight cannot fully settle. The ordinary body becomes the instrument. The loom's mechanisms continue their patient requirements. Heddles must remain ordered, reeds must stay clean, cords must lift as intended, the cloth beam must take up evenly, the shuttle must pass without striking what it should not. You are not responsible for all of this alone, but your work touches many parts. A broken thread may point toward any one of them. The knotter is often the first to notice. Noticing can be tiring. It means the mind is never fully absent. Even in rhythm, even in repetition, you are scanning for difference, a change in sound, a thread out of line, a weaver's posture shifting toward trouble, a small movement near the edge of the warp. Sleep listeners may find comfort in this, because the attention is not frantic. It is soft vigilance, the kind that keeps a lamp trimmed or bread from burning. By the time such skill has settled into you, the hands often move before language. You do not say, "There is a slack end near the third group from the left." You simply reach. You do not say, "This knot will be too large if tightened there." You reposition it. Words come later if needed. The craft lives first in action, and action becomes quiet when it is practiced well. And as another afternoon leans across the workshop, the LYON Loom Knotter's practiced noticing keeps the looms moving through their small, constant uncertainties. A thread breaks near the far side of a wide warp, and reaching it requires an awkward angle. You take your time finding a stable position. A poor stance makes a poor knot more likely. One foot shifts, one hand braces lightly on the frame, the other brings the hook forward. Your sleeve must be kept clear. The loom is still, but the surrounding room moves, and you remain aware of bodies passing behind you. The broken end has drawn back through the heddle. You follow it carefully, not pulling neighboring threads with it. The heddle eye is small, and the silk has tucked itself into shadow. You use the hook's tip as gently as a finger, catching only what you intend. The thread comes through. You feel its slight resistance, then its release. The mate is found. The knot is made. This repair takes longer than others, and the weaver waits. Waiting has a sound when someone is trying not to hurry you. A shift of weight, a breath through the nose, fingers resting on wood. You understand the pressure, but you do not absorb it as panic. The loom will lose more time if the knot fails. So you finish properly, test and watch the first movement. Only then do you step aside. The wide warp resumes, and the repaired thread travels with the rest. Your back complains when you straighten. You press one hand briefly to the place between shoulder and neck, then let it fall. Such gestures pass through the day almost unnoticed. The body asks, the hand answers, the work continues. We remain in that gentle realism, because comfort does not require pretending the work leaves no ache. A narrow beam of light catches the repair basket and turns loose silk ends into a dull shimmer. The basket is ordinary, perhaps wicker or wood, scuffed from use. Yet inside it lies a small record of the day's colors and failures. Cream, blue, green, brown, red, black. Each discarded end means a thread was cut, tied, replaced or rejected. Waste in a silk workshop is never entirely meaningless. You gather some of the longer pieces and wind them separately. They may serve later for a small repair where exact length is not needed. Thrift is a habit made from necessity and respect. Silk has passed through too many hands to be wasted thoughtlessly. From cocoon to reel to twist to dye to warp, every strand carries labor before it reaches your bench. You feel that history is care, not as a lecture. The sound of rain begins again, faintly, against the high windows. The room does not stop for it. The looms continue. Workers glance up, then return to their tasks. The rain may change tomorrow's thread or tonight's walk home, but for the moment it is only a soft tapping above the larger clatter. You hear it now and then when a nearby loom pauses, like a second, gentler workshop working on the roof. Evening will come, but not yet. There is still the middle stretch of work, the span where repetition deepens and time seems to move by threads rather than minutes. You sit again at the bench, draw a pale strand forward, and prepare the next small knot with fingers that know both fatigue and steadiness. Evening gathers while that pale strand rests between your fingers, and the room seems to lower its voice around you. The knot closes cleanly. You trim the ends, smooth them once, and let the repaired thread return to the long company of the warp. It is no longer separate. It is only one fine line among many, holding its place in the quiet order of the loom. The last machines slow one by one. A shuttle is lifted out and laid in its place. The jacquard cards hang still above the frame, no longer stepping through their paper rhythm. You brush silk dust from the bench with the side of your hand, and the tiny pale pieces gather at the edge like the day's final snow. Your scissors are closed. The hook is wiped clean. The lamp glass warms the air once more before its flame is turned low. You check the warp before you leave it. The temporary ties hold. The new knots sit small and neat. The reed is clear and the heddles hang in their careful rows. Nothing calls you back now. The loom waits without impatience, carrying all the little repairs inside its stillness as the finished cloth rests partly hidden on the beam. Outside, LYON has gone soft with dusk. The stones are cool. The rivers move somewhere beyond the streets. Smoke and supper air drift together under dim windows, and the day's noise falls away from your shoulders as you step toward home. Your hands, free at last, curl once in your pockets, still remembering silk, but no longer needing to answer it. Behind you, the workshop settles into darkness. The bench is bare, the tools are in their places, and the long pale threads lie quiet until morning. The lamp is dimmed, the loom is still, and the work lets go of you at last.